The best damn league show, period, full stop, has returned. Hasn't done a full stop. There you go. But we did have a period where we were in the game. So we will now be back to talk about LEC again. If people don't know, by the way, I'll actually just, because it's my classic Thorin style, the intro is also half scoffed / half break the fourth wall, let you know what's going on, where my head's at. If people don't know, by the way, this show doesn't get like bonkers numbers or anything. So it's not like I run this for like, despite what plebs think, like clout or like fucking crazy ad revenue. I actually do this show. By the way, I probably would have actually finished this show at the end of 2024, because at the time, if you remember, it used to be a show with Dom. Then Dom didn't want to do it anymore because, I mean, he just wasn't doing as much core streaming and he was just doing Power Spike anyway on the same network. And so I had a rotating set of guests. And basically, I actually did think that wasn't as good because, unfortunately, if people don't know with the way the LEC works, nowadays, teams and players practice nearly every day. And it's very hard to actually schedule big guests. Like back in the day on some of the Insight, where could you get anyone for that day, etc. So, unfortunately, the guests also, it meant if it was just me and like a not very famous guest, it was fucking hard work to make it a really interesting episode. So I wanted to have like a good co-host again as well. And so, well, the main reason to run this show is because I actually did know, if you don't know, one day maybe I'll tell you the story, how I like lured Peter out of his semi-retirement, where it's like, in fact, essentially what I did is it was just like, oh, you could do it. And he tried to be like, well, I can only do this one day. It's like, we'll do that then. It's like, oh, okay, shit then. And then it's like, but I knew once I got the hook in there though, once he got the chance to give his opinions, he started to watch the game again and get his juices going. I knew eventually it'd open, oh, maybe I could do this gear too. And oh, maybe we could bring this person out. And I've got him now, boys. So now I've got him out in the open. I've lured the fucking, the bear out of his hibernation cave. Now we're just going to go ham out. So we're doing another year of it. It's all good. We're back.
You literally Blues Brothered him. We got in the band back together. You dragged him out for that last show, and he's just never leaving now. That's how it is.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, couldn't let me, rest in peace, walk off into the sunset,
My only horrifying thought, though, is like Thorin in the nun outfit from that show, just going to Peter like, the Lord has told you need to play the blues again. It's just like, I don't need that in my mind. So there's a couple artists in the LFN circuit. Don't do that. That fan art needs to stay far away from our eyes.
And being as it was already the case that, as you saw from that interview Peter did with me, where it was basically like the Fuck Perks Chronicles, like he's already retired from esports, boys. He's not going to be a coach again. So he's actually now finally a rare person who's both an insider, knowledgeable, and can say all of their own opinions about the teams, etc. So I also think that just has value. I think that's an interesting proposition to have. It's very rare you get that, unfortunately. So obviously our guest is Initialise. He's actually been on, I think, every season of this show that we've done.
Yeah.
Obviously, I will just say this. He is a commentator for the LPL. He does most of the games. He obviously does it on his own channel now, which has almost itself like a core stream vibe as opposed to the traditional casting style. It's even literally sometimes just him talking all the time into a mic, depending on if Nightmare is available. I also did it politely there. I didn't do the usual, like, hey, it's the budget Nightmare. It's Nightmare's brother. Because he is a human of in his own right, with his own like career, motivations, dreams, etc. He doesn't just go, hey, can I get in the game? And Nightmare like, no, I'm doing it now, actually.
No,
I'm playing. I know, exactly. Like
Only when we're really bickering. Only when we're really bickering, the sibling synergy is a whole thing.
Sure. It's okay, he's back. And obviously, even though, yes, he does mainly follow the LPL, you're just someone who loves League of Legends and watches all the big regions, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I probably watch less LCK than I once did, purely because it's the same hours of LPL. But I catch pretty much all the highlights. I watch the big games. All of that kind of stuff. I engage with a lot of the ERL stuff as well, do some NLC things. Obviously, that team's shrunk again, so doing that via team stuff now, so potential stuff with G2, doing some stuff with some of the Dear orgs, all the rest of it. So there's lots of stuff there as well. So I know a lot of the European Tier 2 stuff as well, which coming into this particular split of LEC has a bit more weight because of some additional teams.
Yeah. So, okay, we always obviously have the guests start. So what is good in LEC/European League of Legends right now?
I am super, super happy they have actually decided to go with more road shows again. They were by far the best part of the live shows last year. They were super successful. You've got these massive fan bases who are regionally locked. And again, one of the strengths of Europe is the fact that you do have these massive regional fan bases and rivalries. Spain and France in particular have got massive teams there. And I'm really excited to see we're getting more of those road shows. If I can add some context on this one for an example, I did some content with GX last year. It was a really fun little bit of like just fun game showy stuff. But I was chatting with some of the players, and basically they were saying, actually, when they turned up to the LEC venue in Berlin, they didn't think they had fans. They thought no one liked them. And like genuine, and they were having, and it was after that Gil Hoto tweet. The Gil Hoto tweet had gone really wrong. They'd made that really spicy content about G2. It was really funny, and it had gone so wrong. They're being memed on, and they were just feeling really down in the dumps. And they go on that roadshow, and they go to Spain, they go to Madrid, and they have a whole arena screaming their names, and you have this incredible like burst of joy from the players. They go, "Oh, holy shit! We have not just got fans; we've got an arena cheering for us." What? And they pop off. And actually, they have this really big resurgence. It's not quite enough, but that team that had really fallen into the dumps had this massive resurgence, and it was really awesome to see this team really grow in stature as a result of that. And even on those like small levels, the fact that you have that incredible kind of fandom that can be so regionally locked, actually they can't make it out to Berlin so easily. They are largely a Spanish audience with the kind of the background there with Giants being a Spanish organization. Being able to travel to where the fans and stuff are around Europe, I think is really, really awesome. It gives the teams more opportunity to get involved. I think money in esports is a tricky one, but if you are able to leverage that kind of fan engagement in your local areas to fill out stadiums, a la like the KCX experiences, I think that is a good thing for Europe, and I hope it continues to be managed and grown well, and see whether this year is a big step up on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's really good. However, I put two things in it, right? The first two qualifiers. The first is that it's just Koi and KC, as far as I understand, who are doing the road shows, right?
Yes, so far,
which is, you know, it kind of makes me wonder what the rest of the leagues are doing, what the rest of the league is doing, right? Because I mean, obviously, Koi, owned by Overactive Media. Basically, I think my understanding is one of the big reasons why this organization got into esports in the first place was to do the road shows through the Overwatch League, and obviously they have a lot of that expertise on the Koi side, and obviously KC are from the KC side able to put on these great events. Koi too, obviously, right? But it makes me wonder, like, when are G2 doing their event, right? When are Giants could do something, right? Like it's not like, or even Heretics, right? It's not it. The problem I have, so obviously the live events are great, but it kind of concerns me that only two orgs seem to be pushing forward and able to host these kind of events. You know, how can an org like, I just use Giants or G2 gain the experience to also host these kind of events if they're not doing anything and they don't have the ability to kind of grow. You know, I don't think that shifters, should be given a roadshow. But, I would expect some of these other orgs to be pushing for these events, and either they're pushing and not being awarded the events, or they're not pushing. And both those two things are concerning for me for the long-term health of the ecosystem. But obviously, it's great that we're having events in Paris and Madrid. I think aren't Koi's events going to not just be in Madrid?
I think they might be in other locations, but I don't have the list up in front of me.
But Barcelona, I just checked it. So they're going to do one in Barcelona and two in Madrid. So that's great as well, right? The fact that Badalonia? Okay, I don't know where. I don't know
maybe not
where that is. Okay, but anyway, the point I'm making is that these it's just the two orgs, right? And I hope more orgs will either take the initiative to host these events and take the risk that comes with it, or that they're awarded these events if they're pushing for it already.
I think I can speak on the G2 situation a little bit. Some of this is supposition. I don't want to speak for G2, but I did a fair amount of work with G2 last year. I did co-streaming Worlds in their office, did some work with them. We myself and America collaborated to do a little combined watch party thing. And so they definitely do fairly regularly organize big get-togethers and watch parties and stuff. So they're definitely quite active in that front. It's not like they don't do anything. I think one of the things they run into is they are not region locked, right? They used to be a Spanish organization. They are not anymore. They haven't been for a number of years. That dissipated a while ago. So they've become a pan-European organization. Beyond that, honestly, especially if you go into other games, right? They've got, I think their Valorant team was NA, right, when they were doing VCT stuff. Sure. I want to say, and I want maybe Rocket League as well. I don't want to, I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but I know they were definitely doing stuff, particularly over in America as well. However, one of the things you then run into is okay, I don't have a concentrated group of fans in one city where I can hold an event, and I know that my fans are all in that place, and therefore I can get them to come there. G2 is a bit more pan-European in that sense. I think they probably could push for a roadshow, especially if they were given a chance to organize it in advance. But I think it's a little bit riskier and harder to say. It's less easy to say this is the city where we will get people to turn up and show up. For KC, Paris is simple. They have adverts on the Parisian metro selling Army Corps shirts. They are that popular in Paris. They have metro adverts for the team, which is kind of wild. No other esports team has kind of got that level of pull in that local regional area. And, similarly for Koi and Ibai's kind of roots in Spain and that group there. So that's definitely one of the things with G2. The other thing is the teams are the ones fronting the costs, as I understand it. So it's not being funded by Riot. They're just being told, you guys can put on the show and you get proceeds and stuff there. So you get the kind of the blowback from running it, you get the money from it type thing. But you aren't getting subsidies to put on the show. So if you're tying those two things together, if you don't necessarily have a very easy city/country within which to say, well, our fans are here, let's put it here and get loads of people to turn up and do it, and you're the ones fronting the cost, I can see how it is a risk for a team like G2 to sort of put on the show and then have 200 people turn up or whatever, and then that makes you look bad. It costs you a lot of money, and it's potentially a risk. I still think it'd be cool for them to do it. I think they could definitely pull it, but I can understand that it is not so simple as like, oh, no brainer, just put on the show. There's quite a lot to keep in mind when you do it.
Sure. No.
See.
Thanks.
I'll address that part first too, because I can give you a little bit of insight there, I think. First of all, if you don't know, one of the dirty secrets of the Overwatch League is behind the scenes, the owners of those teams, even the ones who themselves said they wanted the homestands, actually were so glad that the world went online and they didn't have to run them, because they actually quickly calculated how much it would have cost to do each one, and the fact they were going to have to do all these home and away, and they realised they would have bankrupted their own orgs. Like they would have, because the problem is, and I know no fan can understand this, because they see the arena full of people and they see people wearing jerseys and they see people excited. You lose money running live events. That's just a reality of esports. Like the regions that and places that don't in esports tend to be things like you run it in a country where people will work very cheaply and one person does 3 jobs. Like, so essentially, by the way, it's like the old joke of like, yeah, how did they accomplish this great ancient marvel? Back-breaking slavery that no human would ever accept now. Like, guess what? You can do a lot of things if you can do that. So the point is, first of all, you essentially do live events, as far as I'm aware, for things like, one, fan outreach, so that people have a chance to buy the jersey and to feel part of it. Also, by the way, you do it for marketing, both for the league, in terms of it looks great to have a live event. It's actually one of the reasons in Counter-Strike you want the big arena event, because that's all the hype of the esport, is that you're in an arena and it's real sports. And, and then also, similarly, you want it to be where it's marketing in the sense that, look at all these pictures I've got of my fans, a rabid KC horde of people. That's not the city. You can't show sponsors. The joke is you never would with KCorp. A bloody Twitter thread of like, look at these KC win hashtags. The joke is that'd be the only part of the tweet you'd be able to show the sponsor, isn't it? Because the rest would be all like, delete yourself from the game called life. That's why even I had to do the Twitch thing. I'm not even on fucking Twitch. I'm on my own OBS. Could have said anything, couldn't I? Anyway, so first of all, if I had to guess why it is, here's the sad reality actually of European esports is being good at the game doesn't actually make you win. Like the problem is KC and MKOI are arguably more attractive properties in League than G2, because G2 is just like our literal identity is we just win the league. Not even like we have this crazy fan base. We have that. Did G2 even have ultras? They seem like a Cloud9 to me. They have more kind of chill fans. They don't have some lunatics.
They've definitely got a very engaged audience, and I will say that actually they do a very good job in terms of doing quite a lot of fan stuff. They don't necessarily have the ultras, but the G2 Army stuff is very engaged. They do actively look for some fairly cool collaborations and stuff. But again, they've built a lot more of their brand on being good. That's one. And again, that only takes you so far. Fnatic had that issue, right, where they kind of had that initial Huni reign over era into Broxer, Reckless, Caps, and then it all sort of slid away a bit. And not that Fnatic are necessarily a bad organization anymore in terms of their successes, but they haven't necessarily managed to turn that into the same hype and like most popular team in the league that they were once de facto, right?
Put it this way,
I will say for G2 the fact that they've actually done some decent work in terms of like actually having a socials brand. Like actually they did a fair amount of work in terms of that rebrand to becoming doing some more interesting content, doing some more spicy meme stuff as well, and reaching out to various different areas. I've got a beer can over there. That's a Gold 2 G2 branded beer can. They did a beer collaboration in Germany to make these kind of like silly little bits there, which is just like, which they turn up to all the events with and that kind of thing. So I do appreciate some of the creativity there, even if it isn't on the same, like, we've just put together an arena show here in Paris or whatever, which, you know, is a different vibe.
How's the beer? Is it good?
It wasn't bad, actually. It was really German, like, microbrewery stuff. It was very tasty. German Pils.
Essentially, I don't think G2 would gain anything by running of it. I think they would just lose money. I actually think they are in the perfect spot. They are the guest for everyone else's homestand, the guest of honour. And in fact, because they're G2 and they've always done that, we don't mind you hating us, they play up to the fact that they're going to get flamed and be like, oh, bring it on, and all that shit. So if anything, G2 is actually in the best min-max spot. They get to be at a homestand, sell things, but not take any of the costs and still be always invited to all of them, except for that one where it looks suspiciously like people didn't invite them for whatever, just to fuck with them or whatever. But that's by the by. I don't think genuinely G2 could fill a massive stadium like KC, and I don't know where their home stadium would be. It's not as obvious. Yep. They don't have the same regional connections to get a cheap deal. And then lastly, the reason why I'll say I just don't believe G2 have the same kind of engaged fan base is because, does anyone remember this little detail? I know it's going to be a piece of trivia. I just have a very good memory. During Worlds, there was a tweet a day or two before the final of Worlds where they said, if you come down to the G2 offices, you can just watch the game with us and have a bunch of food. Mate, if you said that in a KC thing, you'd have to shut the office 10 minutes later and have like a line. As far as I can tell, people just milled in, and it was just a few people were like quick shots something mad watching in like the G2 office. It was something.
I was there.
There you go. That was you. There you go.
So we definitely. So it depended which games were on. The G2 game, the office was full. The other games, less interested. And they did a World's Finals one as well, and they did one in Berlin, and that was like they basically had like a large cinema with loads of like extra stuff and loads of drinks and stuff, and that was full as well. But that was probably 100, couple hundred people. It wasn't thousands of people in the arena.
The problem is
decent pull but it was decent pull for Berlin, I guess.
Yeah, but this is the number one team of all time in the region, mate. And at the end of the day, KC, even before they'd come 10th place, was filling like 20k stadiums just to announce players and not even have a match.
Sure.
Like,
Makes
they are on another level. So unfortunately, that's the reason why, in my opinion, they're the ones that run the homestand. I agree. Potentially, you could have the other Spanish ones do it, as in they could connect the same fan base. But then also, this is all negative. I think it is good that they have the road shows. By the way, spoiler, it's not just because I'm from Counter-Strike. That's one of the reasons I like Counter-Strike. I tell people this all the time. It's not actually Counter-Strike, the game, that makes the game so compelling to follow. It's that every tournament, which lasts a week, is a distinct entity. You get a finals, you get a championship Sunday. And I know if you're from League, you're going to go, that must get real old. It doesn't. It doesn't. In the UFC, does anyone ever watch the UFC and go, it's boring seeing all these main events and title fights. I wish it was just a really long league and they had one title fight at the end of the year. No one would say that. They love that you have this fucking crazy like amount of things to watch, and you can always get back into the same cycle of you start at the bottom and then you watch the first match and then you build up to the top. That's what you do on the week through the playoffs. You go from the group stage, you mix the play, then you fall through. That cycle works and can be iterated many times. So this is bringing a little bit of that. It's obviously not got the tournament element, but the fact you got a live show to League. Also, by the way, European and Western League of Legends has desperately needed this because of the online era and the fact that once they realised you can just do this for cheap in a studio, they stopped doing live events, because there's a stat, if people don't know, that is actually one of the most damning I've ever heard. Remember back in the day, the German mid laner Abedage, people used to say he chokes on stage. He then won a load of championships and middle order finals, never appearing on a stage because it was always in a studio. So it's like that narrative doesn't even work. That we don't even know that he ever got over it, because all he did is just get to play the finals in a fucking stage, to a studio instead of a stage. It was just the same place you play the game if you're the last place team and it's a BO1. So I do think it is important, as you actually saw last year at the homestands. Bro, at the homestands, I saw people like Skumond actually choke because of the pressure. That baying crowd and knowing that everyone in there is waiting for you to lose, and you haven't actually been in a lot of big finals. It looked like a normal games he ran the LEC, mate. It looked like he was fucking shocking some of those games. Some of the teams you saw that happen with them, where they would have won the BO1 in the studio, but they lost it in that scenario. So I also like that aspect, by the way. That's one of the best things about esports, is the fact that you can also, even though it's a video game, you can also have this physical component where you have to walk out in front of people. Go on, Peter.
Yeah, and the contrast the other way, right? Because obviously Noah and Jun on GX, like Noah and Jun, when Fnatic had their famous loss against G2, where they were like 10k ahead, at 20 minutes in half the games in the series, right? Like or 8K. I can't remember the exact amount, right? But it looked like Noah and Jun were like kind of choking in that series. But then you go and see them in kind of like in front of the fans, and they look really, really good in that. I mean, I guess it was the Koi homestand, but the Spanish homestand. And I mean, it goes the other way too. Maybe they would perform better in front of these fans, right? But we get to see that too. So
yes,
yeah. And then actually that other side of the Skewmoin coin is then the redemption in summer, right, where they went right back to Spain and they did it and they got the 3 over MKOI. Like that was that kind of recovery. The fact you can get over that stuff is really big. And yeah, I think the other thing is it's just significantly more interesting to watch with the crowd noise and the fans there and the casters get more hype. And that you don't get the same energy when it is just you yell. Like I say this as a caster, right, as a play-by-play, right? Me losing my brain over the most insane play of all time where there is no crowd noise in the background as it's just me and the dulcet tones of the Summoner's Rift theme just doesn't really hit the same as a crowd losing it with you. That does give you that extra bit of energy that I think adds a lot, and I think it's partly why Counter-Strike has got such insane talent as well, when you've got people like Machine who manage that energy better than any other play-by-play in the world as far as I'm concerned. Like that kind of combination of live atmosphere and the commentators building with that as well and the big plays that come with it, I think that's really special, and one of the things that makes esports and sports widely or more widely so engaging and compelling.
And also the other reason why these teams are ones given the preferential treatment, as it were, is because one thing I think people are discovering in LEC, I'll give you a quick counterpoint to this, but I'll tell you the reason why. It might have seemed from the whole Los Ratones drama that all the other big orgs don't want Los Ratones. No, what they didn't like is the idea Los Ratones skips the queue, doesn't do a franchise fee, and then gets to play and have all the same opportunities to market and use their... If you just said Los Ratones is buying a spot in LEC, all the other orgs would be super glad. If you told them SK or Rogue are fucking off, and they'd go brilliant. Because essentially those were deadweight orgs. Those were orgs because it's all just in a studio. They get to just put out shitter rosters and just go, lol, I'm not even spending to try and go to Worlds, but I get to be in the same league and have 90% of the same games. I can tell you if you are a G2, a KC or an MKOI, you're like, why am I carrying you basically? Why you're supposed to be my partner in a franchise thing where we're all making a league succeed. So first of all fan bases aren't created equal, and those two fan bases have earned to have these live events and to be the hosts, quite frankly. Yeah. One thing I'll say as well is this. The one detail I would like to point out, though, I don't know if they do this, but I hope they do, is I'll give you a quick example. When I worked on E-League on American TV, before the TV broadcast went live, a woman would come out from E-League and she would say to the crowd on a mic, right, here are the rules and the protocols. Basically, don't shout out information. Don't be rude to someone when they're walking to the stage. You can cheer, you can boo, whatever you can do. Basically, here's the guidelines. Just do these things and we'll all have a great show and no one will get kicked out. I hope before the broadcast, maybe even on the broadcast, they do that to these home crowds. Because here's the problem. You can have ultras and you can have people be lunatics. You can have people boo and you can have people say you shit. But in my opinion, here is the hallmark of a passionate but a good crowd. I can tell you this as a Liverpool fan. It's one thing if you jeer the players and you go ha ha and when they lose throw in, you laugh at the guy or whatever. But at the end of the match, if the best player, Messi or someone, scores a hat trick, you give him a standing ovation even if he's from the other team. If you do that and you're a KC fan, that's fine. I just don't want to hear those stories of you spat in someone's face or someone lost and then you were like, fuck yeah, once they went like that. That's where it becomes a dark side. I want to just enjoy the positive sides of having this massive fan base.
Sure. Yeah. Or you lost the Super Cup final in football, and your star player doesn't want to give the other team a guard of honor.
That was ridiculous. Is this the La Liga one?
This is the one.
Oh man, I just saw all that drama.
No, the joke is that's a pro player acting like an ultra. That's actually, I don't think people realise how really unprofessional that was. That was actually really bad.
It was very bad.
Very bad.
Don't get me wrong. I guess for the non-football heads, the El Clasico in the Spanish league, in La Liga, is always Barcelona Real Madrid, and the tensions there are higher than probably anything else in sport, actually. There probably isn't anything anywhere near the level of passion those fans have. And basically, like that, like it's always gotten spicy. There's always been comments, but that was like one of the my eyebrows hit the hairline real fast with that one. It was pretty.
I guess we should quickly. sorry for the sidetrack, but
we're on it now.
Because you were talking about good sportsmanship, and I just couldn't get that image out of my mind. But basically, it was Real Madrid versus Barcelona, a really, really big game. Barcelona won, kind of a meaningless cup that didn't really matter that much. But it mattered a lot. And the Real Madrid coach basically asked his players to give a guard of honor. You clap the winning team, and then the star player for Real Madrid basically told the players to just not give a guard of honor and just walked away. And then unfortunately the manager was fired, for losing control of the team like 2 days later, right, which was a bit much. But anyway, just as a side thing, to go back to Thorin's original point, I completely agree. If somebody gives a really, really good performance, they deserve their cheers, in my opinion. But that's how things were done in esports 20 years ago, and 10 years ago. But maybe the new generation is not like that, right? Maybe I just have an idealized version that I hope people would follow this. But
let's go to your point then. What's your good point, Peter?
Oh, my good point. So my good point is that KOI's decision making this off season tells me that the management involved in the org, or the coaching staff, or whoever is making the final decisions in KOI, is not being influenced by the fan base, which gives me hope that this org has a long-term progression and that they're not going to be capped where they are, right? And the reason I'm talking about this is two specific things, right? Which is that Super and Merwin were not extended for their contracts, right? So their contracts are running out this year. I think Alvaro's contract was extended. I don't know if Ilio's contract was running out, but it was very, even though the fan base loves these players, they made it very, very clear that they're not satisfied with the level that these guys are currently on, and they're basically playing for their career. So number one, that's good, okay, because I think that Super in particular has gotten away with a lot over the past 2 years, and this is kind of enough is enough, right? So that tells me that the org, at least, is not listening to the fans. They're making their own decisions, which is smart. The second thing is Merwin. I think, Merwin is somebody that I've coached before. I like him a lot, but there is no question that his laning phase is not at an international level, right? He will get out of laning phase. He's a really, really good team fighter, pretty good on the map, right? But 2 years at the LEC has shown that that is a really big weakness that is preventing him from getting to the next level. And what did they do? This offseason, they went out and got the guy who can most clearly help laning phase, which is Alfari, right? Alfari has been on G2 helping Broken Blade, has basically improved his laning phase a ton. It's very clear G2 really, really like him. But what did KOI do? They basically went out and poached. They didn't, he's not under contract, right? But they basically took him from G2 and put him they gave him an assistant coach role, a full-time role, right? And I assume they're paying him more. But basically, they took him away from their biggest rivals to improve a weakness in their game that most fans, I don't think, even acknowledges there, right? And that leads me to think that the KOI coaching staff or the KOI management structure understands what this all needs to do to go to the next level. And that gives me a lot of faith that they're going to improve a ton this year, even though they have the same players. I don't think they're capped. Whereas I think a lot of people coming into this year think, it's the same group of 5 players. I think that there's something smart there going on in the background, which leads me to believe that these guys can push on, even though they're not changing their roster, they're changing the coaching staff to fix the holes that they were missing before. So that's my good point.
Yeah, I think Alfari in particular was a really astute pickup. If there was one thing Alfari was good at as a pro, it was laning. There's been no European top laner that's been as dominant in lane as Alfari. Alfari had his other issues, his ability to convert lane leads into the rest of the map was quite poor. It was always his big Achilles heel, right? But if there's one thing Merwin needed a bit of help with, it was basically taking standard matchups and learning to play them well, because his way of getting out of crappy matchups with having something kooky picked up in the background. And that's potentially very valuable this year, actually. I'm quite excited to watch Mirwin potentially with some additional laning prowess. And the fact that some of these changes have happened to the meta where you can theoretically run some combat summoners, can theoretically run some more unusual top laners, could be really fun to watch. I think that's really smart. I hadn't heard about the contract stuff, though, and I think that is quite astute. I'm going to withhold judgment a little bit because I do think some of the talent decisions were made a couple years back in terms of I think this is like the end of a fairly long-term plan. So it's what happens with the next step that will be most interested with. And I know there's been a fair number of backroom changes at MKOI over the last year or so as well. And I think a lot of those guys were ones involved with setting a lot of these plans in motion. And with new people coming in, partly off, I think some of it was some internal drama stuff and fan pressure and lots of other stuff going on. What happens with these new guys coming in to continue the work that was set up now that actually the roadmap has kind of hit its end point? Okay, these guys haven't been extended to see what happens next. Well, okay, what does happen next? What is the plan with this? And so I agree, I like the steps. There's quite a lot of road yet left untraveled / unmarked. And that still gives me a little bit of pause. But those will be questions for 6 months to a year, probably.
Yeah.
Right, what I'll do is do the classic one where I'll initially agree to make the good, but then I'll just flame the fuck out of all things I don't agree with. So, look, the Alfari one I think is unquestionably a good move. That's actually even a very shrewd piece of positional coaching. It's like, I think one of the most underrated positional coach moves ever was when NRG had that success at fucking LCS and Worlds. They had Soaz as the top lane coach, right? Again, his style is like, I will teach you how macro works as a fucking top laner, bro. I am essentially the greatest to ever do it, maybe in any region even. Like, so similarly, if you have a player who struggles with some element of laning, and people will forget, Broken Blade had a few dodgy splits here and there if you go to 2024 in G2, and he had times where he looked a little bit pushed out of the meta on some of the picks. So that is probably one of the best people you could bring in. I can also tell you from knowing a little bit about Alfari, he's a very logical person. He's the sort of person who is really good to sort of go over like the X's and O's and what you do. Like, he's not the guy who's just saying, yeah, just vibed. He was a scientist with how he beat people in lane and how he would take like losing matchups and only be down 10 CS when you should be down loads if you don't have gank pressure. So there's so many things he could bring to your team. With that said, I'm actually low-key shocked that it's MKOI's with. Like, if I was G2, I'd have tried to lock him up, mate, make him part of the proper cut. Because again, listen, this isn't like fucking Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares. He hasn't fixed the business now, mate. Like, if Broken Blade has issues again, you need to go back to Yoda, don't you, and find out. So he's now on MKOI. So look, I don't hate it because I do think that was one of the things about Merwin, which on his own, I just do not believe he would take the next step in terms of that. In fact, I think he would actually probably lean on the crutch of time to go even more weird with the picks and even more crazy and play some that isn't even a top laner there. So I think the idea he has to play normal laning, like, let's be real, I actually do think top lane is a very important position in League of Legends nowadays, and you are going to have a really fucking hard time internationally if you have Merwin. I'm sorry. It's funny when he does all that shit in the playoffs in LEC, but bro, there's a reason they don't win the LEC that often. The idea you're going to beat like the T1s, the Gen Gs of the world with Merwin, it just doesn't seem plausible to me. With that said, though, my problem is this. I don't mind that in isolation, Peter, but you then extended it to why the whole roster, it's fine to keep this roster together and this is going to help them, etc. Here's my problem, bro. If you ask me what the number one biggest problem with MKOI would be, I wouldn't even mention a player's name. I'd say they can't win late game. Their macro just literally has like a cliff it falls off after a certain point in time. Hence why everyone in your brain, I'll tell you now how an MKOI game went in 2025, and you'll instantly recognise the pattern. What would happen was loads and loads of early game players and ganks open up the bot lane, accelerate the game, skirmish. Now we've hit, you pick the time, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. The timer now begins. You have to have accumulated enough kills and advantages that you can lose potentially 5 team fights in a row. If you haven't, you have now lost the game and you have finished second, third or fourth in the LEC. That is the way MKOI played over and over and over again. It's one of the reasons why, even though actually they should be considered plucky underdogs that are kind of cool, fans sort of hate MKOI in a way. People who aren't Spanish, like, people just feel like they just let you down or they're going to betray. They almost have a fanatic feel to them at some point in time. If you go to Worlds, people don't feel like they'll be represented. So my issue is, I don't know that anything about Merwin being better at top lane fixes that. Similarly, I always say this, everyone praises El Yoya as a captain. Well, that problem I've just mentioned there is a pretty big captain's issue. One of the things I would have tried to do with a roster move is get someone who contributes to the shot calling elements, or brings some element that Elyoya doesn't have. Maybe he's a secondary voice or something. It doesn't like they've done that. So I don't know. I still have my concerns because, again, I look at it and I say Merwin better get better at lane mate, because if I'm trying to go to national tournaments and my three traditional carries are Merwin, Super, and Jojo, we're not fucking making any finals, mate. We're not beating any Korean team in a best of 5. Like, these things aren't on the table. So it's fine for Peter. He was a European coach. He's thinking, how do you improve in your region? But I don't think this fixes any international problems. With that said, though, I do think it's a great signing for Merwin.
I mean, I just feed on that a little bit, because I do think, so firstly, I think Elyoya is untouchable on this org. But I do think, if you ask me what are MKOI's biggest issues going international, firstly, I would say Super has a tendency to, let's say, lose focus. Like, he's lost a lot of games, like solo.
Oh, he's done some Jackie Love shit, mate. Where he didn't lost the game. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean,
not like this.
Yeah, but I mean, let's call it focus, right? Like, I think it's really a focus issue, right? Like, he gets the adrenaline, and like he just needs to control that a bit more. I think he's got hands, right? He's clearly got hands. He just decision making he gets carried away sometimes, right? I think the Merwin laning phase we talked about, but I think the third thing, the reason why this team is capped a little bit, right? So they've addressed the two things, is that I think Elyoya and Alvaro gets dragged into it a little bit, just plays too fast sometimes. Like, sometimes it's good to play really, really fast when you're trying to snowball a lead, but when you have your 7k gold lead, you don't need to like force on every rotation, right? You go into enemy jungle, you sit in enemy jungle, and you just sit in a bush and dare the enemy to take an aggressive path. And sometimes you'll see they will try to play one way faster than they need to play, instead of like playing for control. And I think, I think Elyoya and Alvaro are to blame a lot for that, and especially at MSI, right? Like, Alvaro and Elyoya were rough at MSI, but it's not something that I think you can't fix if they acknowledge that this is an issue, if they recognize that this is an issue. And my hope for MKOI is the fact that they've done these two things suggests that they understand these issues, but obviously somebody has to go and have that talk with, I don't know whether it's Elyoya calling or Alvaro. I assume it's Elyoya, right? Given what we've heard from the comms, somebody needs to have a talk with him and just sit down and say, when we have these leads, you just need to play slower. You just need to play like 1 or 2 ways slower and just sit in jungle and play for control, right? And that I think is an issue which is easy to recognize. I'm not saying it's easy to fix, but I'm saying it's easy to recognize, and it's easy to find teams to emulate as a fix. Whether they can apply that in game, is different, right? But I think the issue is very easy to identify.
Yes,
I had similar thoughts about the fast play, slow play thing as well. Because actually, I have similar things with Mickey X, actually. And Hillisang had similar issues, but actually, phenomenal fast plays. Would make these really fast, snap, clutch plays that you could snowball into great wins. And Alvaro and Elyoya, as a combo, one of the best fast play combos. I had similar issues with Razork. Actually, Razork and Mickey X had similar issues in the fast play versus just taking it a bit slower, playing it a bit more methodically, that came out a bit frustrated. And you'd end up like grabbing for plays you just didn't need to. Additional meta point, though, the big bane of teams that loved to fast play last year, and it's very true in the LPL, and it's the reason I am so glad it is gone, is we have lost Atakan, bane of all teams, ultimate coin flip objective, shreds all your resistances, you're ahead of the game, you start Atakan, looking to fast play it, snap engage, have no resist, die, throw the game, everything falls apart. See Worlds, where what happened to MKOI at Worlds, where they were well ahead of the game, and then threw it with some ungodly plays around Atakan in mid lane. Well, what do you know? And that will probably help because it will remove the dangling tasty lure of an objective that doesn't really win you the game off there, but can absolutely lose you it. And that helps, I think, genuinely. Spicy additional tangent, though. If you were looking for a positional coach or like someone else to come in and help with, okay, look, MKOI, you want to kind of play this style, why not just think about hitting up Hillisang for someone who was always a bit of a macro madman and just saying, you know what, Alvaro, you want to learn to be, you really want to index into this? You want to learn from the guy who taught the rest of the league how to do this? No, just hit him up.
Problem with that
it might end up making things worse, but if you want to index into the style,
Even though I don't mind as an outside suggestion, based on the things I've heard, Hillesang's not a vocal person like that, though, mate. Would have a hard time trying. Like, for example, the joke is one of the things that supposedly caused beef for him and Reckless was when they had a scenario that went wrong. He just said in a VOD review, like, "This is the play of an unskilled player," and the Reckless was like, "What the fuck?" But he just meant because he didn't have the social lubricant to get like you don't say that out loud to someone who's a star player. You know?
I hear the issue. Get a Hillesang translator, so you can have Hillesang, someone who can go get charismatic, and then you're in. It's sorted.
Have Hillesang tell Peter, and then Peter will tell the player what to do. That would work. That would work. Anyway, if we now go to my good point, this is an entirely self-indulgent one, but I actually don't think it's a legit point too. I just don't think anyone else would ever think to make this point. I'll tell you the most slept-on move to LEC of the whole off-season for my money. It wasn't Bussio joining or like, oh, what was going on here? And G2 kept the same roster and they've got Vitality, it now has Human. I'll tell you what the most slept-on move is. That Reapered is now the coach of fucking KCorp. Bro, I am a massive Reapered fan. Not only when he was a player, he was one of the best shot callers ever and like a fantastic thinker about the game, but he is a mega veteran coach who has coached in most major regions as well. And people forget the bane of his career was that he won very few championships. He was sort of a silver surfer who was in a million finals in every region. Bro, to be in finals, you have to all the time be making the playoffs. Like this guy is so rare any of his teams ever failed to make a playoff. It was actually insane how consistent with any squad of players. Give him any. By the way, that's the other thing. This isn't a guy where I've seen him coach, he's coached like 1 bazillion players at this point in time. And so I do think, even though I understand why he was fired from certain orgs, which is coming second when people think you should win, mate, if you want to floor raise a team, this guy is really fucking good. And then also, lastly, the real reason why he's worked in all regions except the LCK is actually the same reason why in his career he didn't have a more great career. Because basically, the problem Reapered has had, and I know a little bit about this from behind the scenes from back in the day, is he basically isn't your traditional Korean who's like clean cut, tries to be respectful, joins the corporate system. As far as I heard, he's more like he's got more of like a gangster vibe, people told me, where he's sort of like a chill guy from like a poor background. And he's infamously, this is where he's an iconoclast in Korea, he's an individualist. He's a guy who thinks if he has a genius idea, then everyone should do what I do. That's not how you do things in Asia. You do not supersede the coach. You are not the coach, and you certainly don't coach teammates. Like, I actually don't think people realise it's actually only because of respect that it's implied Faker gets to do some of those things. And even then, I imagine he doesn't get to go as far as fans might imagine in the West. Like, someone like Perks has gone a million miles further than a Faker or like that ever has, in my opinion. So I think people don't realise this guy is also suited for the Western regions. And if I think of a team like KC with some massive egos and some people who are going to be under a lot of pressure, I think it's even an interesting pickup. I kind of vibe with it. And then lastly, he's got a team with 2 Koreans in it. If you have Koreans, the more, I always say this, Koreans scale and stack together. The more Koreans you add together, the more it helps each of them. It's like a power network or something. Like essentially in this analogy, you're constructing more pylons. There you go, the Protoss analogy for you. They would like that in StarCraft.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. There's the reference.
So there you go. So I actually think it's a banger pickup. I like it. I just think it's a good move.
Honestly, I'm right there with you. I think sometimes coaching has this thing where people attribute success to coaches in a way that is actually quite hard to prove. And the way often you kind of justify your faith in the coach is you see the coach move to another team and actually that team learn to play quite similarly or to the way that they did another team. Tabe is one of my favorite examples.
Sure.
Every team he gets to ends up playing the Tabe jungle support style of gameplay around objectives in the early game, rotations and stuff. It's the reason why him and Tarzan were such a dangerous combo last year. One of the brightest minds in early jungle pathing and creative pick options with one of the guys who was really, really good at setting up his jungle support for game plans and ways to win out the game through these early decision-making trees. Great example of that. I think Reapered is another one of those coaches who we have seen now go between lots of different teams and change the culture and the character of a team, right? In terms of this is how we are going to play the game. And I think particularly he's very, very good, as Thorin said, about raising the floor of the team. There did come issues, right, where you'd hit playoffs and you go, towards the end of the season, some of these flaws that have been there the whole time around mid-game throws and early snowballs that have gone wrong end up biting them in the arse in playoffs. I think it was particularly true on Cloud9, where you'd have very similar arcs over a season or a split that would end in similar ways. But I don't think that makes Reapered a bad player. And I remember one of my favorite LOL journalistic articles of all time came from Pastry Time, who went to the Cloud9 Cloud9, watch Cloud9 prep for playoffs and stuff. This was when they had Ray as one of the top laners. They had that kind of rotating.
Oh,
top
yeah, the
lane.
shield and
It
sword
like
thing.
season 6, 7, something like that. And Ray basically had an incredibly crap champion pool. Like he had played like 6 different champions, and there was this really sort of like thoughtful interview, chatting, like looking at how scrims were done, and Reaper talking about, look, the way I view draft is like, here is my hand of cards. My players play these things, and this is what's going to work with the hand of cards I have. In a world where I can play everything, this is what we should pick. We can't do that. This is what my players pick, and my players. And Ray goes, I want to play Riven. Okay, we play Riven. And you have that kind of ability. You have to have that kind of interesting push and pull that Reapered has around, like, here is what my players play, here is what they want to do, here's the comfort, here's what they have, here's what they can't do, here's the hands of cards I have to build a team and build a draft out of this, build a concept for the game out of this. And I think he's really, really good at doing that. And if I'll see if I can find the link to that article at some point again, because I'll share it again, because I think it's one of the more insightful looks at coaching and how it is done, and really gave an insight into who Reapered was. And that was probably 5-6 years ago, guys. He's been doing it a lot longer since then, and quite successfully. I think the fact he's bringing Busio over from FlyQuest, I think is a big coup as well. I think that's a really fun pickup, and I think it's frustrating for people like Yukino and Busio to come over here. I mean, I think it's great for Busio. I think he's going to have a great time over here with the kind of crazy fan base behind him if he builds it well. I think you're right about the Koreans coming in and giving a Korean coach for them to kind of lock in with will be a really good deal. I'm excited for KCorp, excited for Reapered, see whether we get a Reapered team out of them.
Yep. I mean, I agree with everything you said, and because you guys have covered all the positives, I'm going to highlight. So I agree with all the positives. I think the Reapered is a really, really good pickup. I think it'd be very interesting to watch how he does it in Europe. Obviously, this is a coach that I watched when he was in LJL. He's been in NA for a long time. I will say 2 things. The first thing about Reapered, I think, is that he is not. He has historically not been the type of coach to shield his players from pressure and from criticism. And I think that this is something, depends on whenever you have new people coming into KC who aren't used to KC and who aren't used to what that is, I think part of your responsibility as a coach when you are on a big org like this, with a very vocal fan base and very large fan base, is every large fan base is going to have people that push it too far, right? And it just happens that larger fan bases have a larger quantity. I'm not saying that a larger percentage are problematic on KC, but I would say that KC has more problematic fans towards their own players than any other org, right? I'm not saying that as a percentage it's more, but because they have more fans that sometimes go too far, and I think that was part of the issue with Vladdy last year, right? And I think that this is something we should watch out for, because when Reapered was in NA, he was on Cloud9, when Cloud9 were basically the good guys. TSM were the bad guys, and Cloud9 were the good guys, right? Essentially, for most people. So he found success there playing from the underdog position, coaching from the underdog position. He found success coaching from the underdog position in 100 Thieves. But that is not the project that he's going to be working on now.
Right, that's what you mean.
And that is highlight number 1. Highlight number 2 is, when we talk about my bad point, I'm going to go and highlight some things from Yike. But one of the things that with Reaper teams is he's more willing to let his teams play on the back foot, right? He has a very specific style of how he wants his teams to play. But one of KC's biggest issues, because of the mid-jungle situation not functioning so well last year, is that a lot of the times they had insane mechanical individual 1v1 laners and really good team fighting. So they just like, okay, we're going to use our laners to get through the laning phase, and then we're just going to out team fight people. And they never improve that kind of playing around jungle thing, which all the top teams can do, right? And that's one of the reasons why their progress kind of stalled over the course of the year. And it will be interesting to see if Reapered is going to be the type of coach who's going to go and push them to out of their comfort zone, right? In a way that Melzet has in the past, for instance, on MKOI, or that somebody like, well, I don't think Dylan does it, right? But in the same way that having Caps on your team, or Young Buck, or Gilotto, right? Like these are coaches that push players out of their comfort zone, and will remain to see. Because I think if KC want to be the best that they can possibly be in summer, they have to be willing to be worse at the start of the year. But at the same point, if you're bad at the start of the year, that can cause problems, right? So that's what I'm going to watch out for this year. But really, really good pickup, especially given what we know about the coaching things. I would say Reapered, disciplinarian with his coaching staff. He will not tolerate a lot of the things that were allowed to happen. Behind the scenes stuff getting leaked. I think it's a bit harsh on Reha. I think like Reha's a pretty decent guy, and as far as I can tell, he had nothing to do with it. But obviously, he didn't keep his coaching staff in check, and that's kind of why he's not on KC anymore. And obviously, the rest of the coaching staff who were leaking these kind of things, like fuck you guys, right? But I don't think we're going to see those kind of leaks because from everything I know about Reapered, he's just not going to tolerate it, right? And he's not going to have those kind of staff members either. So I think it's a really, really good pickup. 2 minor qualifications, but let's be clear, right? It's me not giving a 10 out of 10. It's me giving it like a 9.2 out of 10. These are minor things, right? But let's see. I think it's a really good pickup. I agree.
Right, let's go on then. Let's go to the bad point, Initialise. What are we taking that's bad?
I've gone for a bit of a bad one. And again, it's a little self-indulgent because I am also a caster. But I am really sad to see that the LEC talent team has shrunk again. We've lost GB. We've lost Ginny.
Also indulgent because your own brother didn't get hired.
Yeah, exactly. And it was good. And again, the other side of there's a caveat, as I'm also telling about my brother here.
Yeah.
Nymera was on LEC last year. Is not on the announcement for this year as well, which is really sad to see because I think you are losing some really, really, really talented broadcasters there. And I think, again, it's showing that the fact that esports and I think LoL in general is getting smaller in terms of the talent pool. And I think that is pretty tragic because a lot of this is tied to co-streaming stuff, I suspect, and like trying to make broadcasts cheaper and the money not being there in the same way. But I think you are losing some very, very valuable resources and insight and talent that you're just not going to be able to replace that easily. So, for example, GB, Gulborg, let me get his name correctly, is probably the best person at creating innovative analyst desk and content ideas I've ever met in content stuff. Like his idea to come up with weird and kooky and interesting concepts for analyst desk, probably Menenda were probably the best at it at LEC across the years, where they would just have these incredible ideas come out of nowhere. Ginny, multi-game, multi-language host, interviewer, that's quite hard to come by. I know you've got lore and stuff, but I think that's really sad to lose as well. And obviously Alex, for my money, is one of the most engaged, interested, knowledgeable casters on the planet. He watches God knows how much League, does LPL full-time, did LEC full-time, knows LCK, does LCK podcasts, is on about 30 other podcasts, wonderful caster, all that stuff as well. Losing that and having had a great year and great responses to most of those characters as well, it is frustrating. And then I think part of that is to do with things like actually a lot of views now coming in from co-streaming and stuff as well, and that's fine. But one of the things with co-streaming, and I say this as someone who does co-stream for the record, like I've co-streamed EMEA Masters, I co-stream LPL. Yes, I do the LPL one as more of a cast as much as it is a co-stream. But co-streaming is additive value. If you're taking a broadcast with all the casts on it, you've got a 1.0 there, and then you get to sit there and add on to it, and that's great. You get some wonderful insight from that, especially if you've got co-streamers who've got really good insight into the game, or the teams or the players. They don't have to like follow the flow of the game. They can really focus on specific bits and all that kind of thing. But it's additive value to that 1.0. If at the end of the day we end up in a world where actually you've got a 0.5 or a 0 because the broadcast is just gone in a kind of worst case scenario, you're adding what, 0.2 to like a dead stream? That would be really sad to see, and I think it would be a real disappointment and a potential, for me at least, worst case scenario. And again, I say that as someone who was a caster, who was also a co-streamer, who's friends and or siblings with some of the talent I'm talking about here. But I think that is a real loss for Europe and the LEC, and I hope to see a lot of them back in some capacity somewhere down the line, especially because, as I said, they're just really fucking good at their jobs. And you lose out on a lot of endemic talent that you just don't get from people who don't have the same kind of broadcast skills. These guys put years into being good at that, being on show and building a show, elements of broadcasting work.
Yep, I mean, I fully agree. I think also, it's not just the casting; it's also the content side of the product as well. Like we went from a situation 2 or 3 years ago to having, massive hype videos. I just mentioned the rap videos because those were the really popular ones with the fans, and things like this. And there doesn't seem to be a desire or budget or, whatever it is behind the scenes to go and create this kind of content anymore. Which to me, as somebody who lived through what we would call the good times, is I feel it's a big loss to the product. I think it also means that it's important to have a strong, talent within your broadcast, because in some ways the broadcast has to be the neutral, the more neutral, more nuanced, like stable.
You have to talk about everyone, right? Like you
you have to talk about everyone.
Yeah.
And also, you have to. It creates the baseline, which then you can have the hot takes, right? But if everything is just hot take, because that's what's getting the views, you then lose sight a little bit of long term progression and long term history, right?
I'm should just be a bit more professional. It's the official broadcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, right?
And you don't get, especially if it's like, oh, I think this player is shit. It's like, great, but are they getting better? Or is there things that they are good at or whatever? And you don't have to have those conversations, or teams you don't care about as much and you don't follow so much. You end up running into those issues. Like LPL is a great example. There are a lot of fucking LPL games. There are so many games. There's less this year, but we are getting like 9 game days quite regularly, starting at ridiculous hours, and covering all those teams, knowing all those stories, even for the teams that are the little guys that aren't as popular, maybe some players who aren't so good. It's just tough.
Yeah, luckily on this one, I can actually direct people. If you watch the latest Summoning Insight, we literally break down this topic for probably like half an hour, including with Nymera, and he gives you his own thoughts.
Yeah.
And I even give you like some of the behind the scenes things I've heard about the scene. So I'll direct you towards that, and instead I will just briefly add some things I didn't say on that show. So first of all, since we are in a world where euphoria just went away, and that means essentially shoulder content also is being downsized and cost saving, etc. If there was ever anyone that you could have just had do a fucking talk show of his own, spoiler, he does Summoning Insight now, it was Nymera. He could have just made the shoulder content for you. He's the sort of idiot that probably do it for free. But I've never understood why Riot just looks the gift horse in the mouth like that and lets essentially me just benefit from him doing the show with me instead. And so also in theory, I should actually be biased and say it's brilliant for me, and now I'll get another co-host for Summoning Insight for a few months. But here's why it isn't though. I think it's even worse that he isn't even working at LEC. I don't give a fuck whether what anyone thinks about like industry politics. I thought this guy should be on international events. Never mind fucking LEC. The idea he can't even get through the LEC gatekeep, because again he would have been sat at home like he has been for years now, not getting to go like to the fucking international event where he knows all about the LPL and knows the history of fucking the LCK players, and like, give me a break. Like again, these Riot are just so bad at talent identification in my opinion, and then developing them crucially. Instead they seem to do the opposite. They go, oh, you're good, right, we'll secretly meet all these like criteria I will never explain to you. Oh, you didn't manage to read my mind. Well, guess you're just on the outs then. Because here's the bomber to me. He isn't some like spring chicken rookie. He's been on and off the broadcast now a bunch of times. And crucially, if you think of the analogy in elite universities, at least back in the day, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, the premise goes everyone has to have A's across the board. Then it's the extra shit that gets you in. Did you do like a charity initiative, or like, fucking some shit where you had a project on the side, or you're an entrepreneur? He'd done all that. So he's done everything you can do to get on the... So at this point, here's the reason it's also a bummer to me. I don't know what he can do to get back on. He's doing everything and has done everything. Like at this point, they just don't like him for whatever reason. And they chose him quite early on in the cost-cutting people to kick out the door. Even though, again, I would have picked different people. And then lastly, what I would also say is this is actually, beyond that, a much darker trajectory for League of Legends, because one, yes, as core streaming gets bigger, it feels like the main broadcast contracts, as it expands, this contracts, and we get into some sort of parity level, which I understand in terms of viewership makes sense. But as you guys outlined, there are things a professional, real broadcast that will have posterity value has that you cannot get from a casual broadcast or a fun core stream broadcast, or one where it is just someone giving their takes and saying, this guy's shit. And it's like, that's actually a champion. And I get, well, you can have that opinion. On the broadcast, you can't say that. And there's actually a value to that. So what people won't get is because I say that, they don't get this. I didn't do that when when I was on events. When I'm on events, I never swear. I never make overly rude comments about it. I would always keep it within a certain guideline. Different to if I was on my YouTube channel or I was on my talk show, etc. I think both have value, in my opinion. It's not which one do you prefer and pick that. We want all of it, by the way, so then we get all the viewers and we cover all the possible perspectives. And so here's the dark trajectory. People forget the good days of how good it got thanks to the battles of people like Monty and Papa Smithy and some of the Quick Shot and some of the people behind the scenes. So people don't know, if you go back in time 10 years ago when the viewership was still amazing, this job was a fucking nightmare to be broadcast. You worked all day long with no breaks. There was no rotating cast. You do all the games. You have like very little break time. Sometimes you don't even get enough sleep. You don't get paid as much. Unfortunately, what happens when you have economic downturns and you do these cost saving measures is you start to get more like that. Like when you go from 14 people to 10, logically, there cannot be as many breaks for the people who are working the game. Logically, there will be days when someone does all the games. There will be times where it was even suggested by Naimira, maybe now they go to a two-man desk for analysts instead of three analysts. You know, these are all the things that were luxuries before and we got to enjoy on the expansion. And when you go the other way and you contract, they go away and it becomes a little bit more like you're in the D-man Joe Miller days where it's a bit scuffed and things aren't as good. So unfortunately, I also worry that in general, cause LEC's had these cost-saving measures across the broadcast for like 2 years now, that this continues. I certainly hope not, because actually the idea it's a major esporting region, but we're not going to push the boundaries out and try new things and do it. I think that's just sad. I think it's sad for everyone. Yeah. And the games will still be good, but to me, the game never was enough to sustain it. You always needed shoulder content. You always needed the right personality. You always needed the storytelling.
Because it gives structure and like people to enjoy. Because again, like one of the things I always appreciate about, say, Monty and Doe was their ability to give the titles, the nomenclature, the little nom de guerres for all the players. The immortal score made score famous. The unkillable Demon King comment that got pulled from that one interview made Faker's kind of mythos work. And that bit of storytelling and narrative stuff that you can do and build is so cool. And you don't get as much of that from coaching. Yes, you can champion players. Like again, there's a couple LPL players and LEC players and Amir Master players. I do that with all the time, but it's not as actually like deliberate, as guided, as all those kind of things as well. And again, I want to reiterate, the talent team the LEC has got this year is still superb. It's a great team of talent. The pro players they brought in are actually also really, really charismatic people. I love seeing Jack and Finn and Odo and all these people doing good work there as well. I just think it's a shame that actually it isn't still including these other people who are also fantastic. Like I don't think it should have been a reduction, really. You know, I think the team was pretty great, and that's a real shame.
Okay, Peter, you already teased it before. What is your Yike related point for the bad point?
So my Yike related point. So it's hard to go straight to a full negative point because we have no games to see, right? I've got. I mean, you know,
true. It is true.
So my negative point, my bad point, is about a player needing to prove himself, right? And I think that something that's gone under the radar a lot because of the Vladdy situation and because of other things that went on in KC last year. You know, it's very easy. You know, you can talk about Hannah's collapse against Oscar in the like key deciding game. You know, that I mean, maybe Oscar's best game for Fnatic, but best series for Fnatic. So people look at Canna and then they look at the Vladdy situation and they look at the coaching situation. But one thing which really, really went under the radar last year was Yike's, how do I say this? Yike's inability to have any kind of control in the early game, right? And, you know, if you look at kind of Yike's win rates on champions, God tier Maokai player, God tier Skarner player, really, really good Lilia and Ivan player, right? But a lot of the meta junglers, KC were just not a lot of the meta junglers that you were required to be proactive early on in the game. KC were not able to find success with. The most obvious one being Vi, right? I mean, it was a meme for like, yeah. I mean, he got wins by the end of the year on this champion, but it was like a long running joke, you know. Oh, ha ha ha! It's the luxury pick, you know, that you pick against the teams that you disrespect, right? Now, the best way I can kind of describe this is in terms of stats, okay? And I got the stats up just before I made this point, which is that on a team which had a 60% win rate over the course of last year, Yike had the first blood participation rate of 29%, which is outrageously low for a jungler under these situations.
Agreed.
He's behind in CS in 2/3 of his games. He's down in gold in almost every single one of his games, right? A little bit of this is on champion pool, but a little bit of this is often it is a jungler's responsibility to create opportunities in the early game. And KC were a team which were notoriously poor at pushing anything in the early game, right? Their leads that they got were individual laning leads, normally from Cannon in top lane, sometimes from bot lane, sometimes even Vladdy, especially in
early on in the year,
in the year was getting these individual leads, right? But the fact that Yike was not involved in more than a third of KC's first bloods over the course of the year. He had, Shio was getting higher first blood win rates on a team that had half of his win rate, right? On a team which had half of his win rates. And my concern is, mid jungle is obviously, I always call mid jungle a duo lane, right? So obviously if the mid laner is struggling, your jungler is going to struggle as well, right? But I think my negative point is that, why is this a negative point? It's because I think that Yike's performance because he was so good in winter and because he had a good first stand, people kind of ignored that it wasn't just Vladdy who was like really, really struggling in the early game. It was Yike as well. And I think that now Yike has gained a really, really more vocal support, right? Like, I mean, if you knew nothing about what was going on behind the scenes, you could argue Busio was probably FlyQuest's best player in summer and at Worlds, right? Like, obviously, we know Inspired, as people who followed the game for a long time, we know Inspired was doing almost all of the shot calling, right? But it looked at times like Inspired was tilted. Let's say tilted, right? With his team at some point. So Busio was the one who was really showing, right? So now he's got a new mid laner. He has a new coach who has a ton of experience, coached some of the best junglers in the West, and he now has a more vocal support who wants to play a more proactive game, right? Rather than Tugmas, who really, really like to play the 2v2 with Khalees. And I think if KC want to do well this year, Yike has to kind of be the one who steps up, right? In part because he has 2 Korean solo laners, right? So I don't know how good their English is going to be. But also, there is a chance that if KC don't step up, there's a lot of teams under them that can kind of push them, Vitality, picking up Humanoid. Maybe you go and look at, maybe GX actually finally show their scrim performances on stage. There's an obvious clear top 3 coming into this year, but we already know that MKOI are going to clutch things out when it gets into playoffs. We already know G2 are G2, right? So if you ask me who of their top 3 can drop out of the top 3, it's KC. And who has the responsibility to stop them doing that? It's Yike. And what does Yike have to do? He has to go and be able to have more assertive early games, right? And I think that that's part of the issue that they had last year, and one of the reasons why they fell off so much. And, obviously some of it's on Vladdy, but if they still have those same problems, by the end of spring, we'll give them winter off, right? Because new roster, give time for people to jump. If they still have those problems going into spring, then I think that Yike is going to have to bear a lot of responsibility for that. So my bad point is Yike was not getting enough criticism last year, but hopefully he can show those improvements coming into this year. That's my point.
I think I would also then sort of like call out that we had similar concerns about Yike, more on his champion pool issue, really, at the end of his tenure with G2, because it was that end of that G2 era where Mickey X and Yike left. And, we saw him go to KC, and actually he got to be a more vocal veteran member, wasn't beneath Caps and Broken Blade and all these other people who had a lot more agency and I guess a veteran weight within the team. So actually his ability to change his role from being the rookie under everyone else to being someone with a bit more say in how the game was played and what you were doing. We thought maybe KC would be a good option with that. I remember chatting with you guys a little while ago about that one way back in the day. And there was still that issue, the champion pool stuff. And actually part of that is actually just as you were saying, Peter, like he doesn't really have great early game fighter skirmisher champion pool with much success on it. And I agree largely with your points. I think he's going to have a fair amount to prove this year. I think on the whole, we saw him take the exit from G2 and do a pretty good job with that early on. I think it did fall off a little bit. And again, a lot of those are those issues that kind of flew under the radar a little bit. I worry a little bit that if it does go wrong, and this is just in general, but I think this goes for Reapered too, if it does go wrong, things rarely go wrong with KC quietly. And the fans will you get that because it's a big, very passionate fan base. You get that really interesting divide between half the fans that are going to stand there and back them no matter what, and that's great. You stick with your players even when they're struggling because that's what you want them to do. The other side of that is you are going to have, because it's just such a big passionate fan base, a lot of people going, this guy's shit. What is he doing here? Why is he here? What's going on with this? And if you're then getting all that pressure thrown at you when you've already got like all these new players coming in, multi-language stuff, Koreans in there who've just got who coming in from DRX challenges, Yike having a year where he's not playing the right champions, and the Vice stuff stops being a meme and starts being a kind of an insult to be thrown at him. There is a world where if it goes wrong and they don't balance here's how we grow as a team and do things we're uncomfortable with and trying to get better as a team versus we need to get some success to get some momentum going. If you don't balance that right and it goes wrong, I really worry that there could be that kind of horrible spiral that we saw kind of happen towards the end of last year, where it all kind of just like fell apart on a sort of like morale and fan intensity and like how much you're under the microscope level.
What I will say with this is people will know I'm not a huge Yike fan. I'm not a Yike hater either. I just do think, for example, that there were times in G2 because they won all those bazillion mini splits that they definitely overrated him. I mean, the joke is because they had a bazillion mini splits, people were talking like he has surpassed Jankos. Shut the fuck up, you idiot. Yeah, in terms of like raw, like number ones on a Gamepedia, but not in any way in terms of the body of work, the things you've done, the internationals, not even vaguely close. What you should have said instead was pretty good sort of rookie career. Even then, by the way, one detail I'll always bring up about Yike is, even though in theory I'm not an ageist because I'm straight fire and I'm in my 40s, he is someone who was already old when he joined the LEC. People forget that. Even though he came out of the LFL, he would already, if people don't know, I think Yike is 1 year younger than Caps. I'll say it a million times over because it's still the craziest piece of trivia out there. So unfortunately, when you've played a long time and you're actually older, and now you've even been at the top level for a bunch of years, I don't expect you to make like light year leaps forwards in terms of what you can like do in your game and open up a whole new side to yourself. As much as I might think Camilu's shit, I'll at least give him the chance that he has a chance to improve massively. He's barely fucking been alive / played professional League of Legends. Someone like Yike actually, at this point, I think is a fairly known quantity. Also, I'll just quickly remind people, this just shows you why when you're doing storytelling and narratives, you can do the hot take, but you have to be willing to then pull back from it when it turns out it wasn't accurate. So as I will always point out, I think one of the craziest narrative shifts I've ever seen is the difference between one day before the split that KCorp won the final and the day after they won the final. The day before the final, when they'd lost the upper bracket and they were coming in to face G2, the narrative was G2 fucked up letting Mickey X go. Actually, maybe that's what the move they should have done. The day KC won the final, everyone went, right, Yike is the best jungler in LEC, and they never should have brought Skumon in. By the way, that has aged appallingly as a take. Like right now, I don't think any GM in the league would take fucking Yike over Skumon if you start a team tomorrow. I think that's an absurd premise. In fact, if anything, they've already got a Yike, but now they've got the upside too that he's a young guy and he's inexperienced and he might be better this year. The problem you have with Yike is, essentially, he started at his best and it felt like it was diminishing returns as the year went forwards. And also, when they won the LEC, people did try to push the narrative because he's older and experienced and a winner already. He is the captain. Well, I'm sorry, like we said about Alyoya, mate, if you are the captain, you get a lot of the credit when you win. You also get all the flame when you lose. That's the nature of how the credit and the blame game go in esports. And so lastly, I'll just throw this out there. I also agree. Here's why he has massive pressure on himself. By the end of the year, despite winning a split, I think actually a lot of experts would have said he isn't even a top 3 jungler. The top 3 would be Skumon, Alyoya, and probably Shayo. I think a lot of people who study jungle would have said, so you're not in top 3, though you're in the top 3 team, by the way, certainly. And then lastly, I've said this for every player so far in the org, and I've been right every time. Check your flag, mate. You're Swedish, not French. So you don't get that protectionism of being in KC. And I'll even just throw this out there. I'll just pop this out there as a little bit of food for thought. Shio is French. Mate, anytime this goes bad, if I'm the fans, I know I'm asking him to join the team. Remember, we've only got Callisto now. Let's get another Frenchie in there. So I agree with Peter. I actually think this is a make or break year for Yike. If this goes badly, spoiler, he'll be on fucking Giant X the year after that or something like that. If this goes awesome, maybe he now gets to have a legendary career and be another Jankos. Let's see.
Yep, and I think that's the thing as well. You know, like I've talked about all the ways that it can go wrong, but obviously it goes well this year. prove all the
Absolutely.
doubters wrong,
Yeah.
prove that it was just Vladdy.
All the things
it
you
was nothing
said,
to do with him.
bro. If he can do it when he's got like Korean solo laners and a rookie mid laner and Busio coming into free, he'll get a lot of the credit again. He'll be given a lot of the credit for that.
Yeah.
Like, I suppose a point of hope then, I actually quite like this Karmine Core roster. I don't know where it's going to go, but I think bringing in people like Reapered, bringing in someone like Busio, who's clearly got a lot of upside and I think is a really interesting support to bring along, you've got some good tools to work with there. It's just what the end result will be. And I think it is right to say, look, there is definitely more than one way this roster could end up. There's a lot of roads to travel and you could choose the wrong one. Yeah.
Right. Go on.
Just one thing. Does anyone have a mid lane take for KC?
I mean, I don't know anything about that player.
Okay.
I'm going to message Chronicle to find out. He did. So
let's wrap up. So because we're not going to talk about KC more, I'll just mention this last thing for KC, which is I actually think that the mid laner that they brought in is actually like somebody that clearly shows more nuance in their scouting, right, versus Poby, right? So one of my issues with Poby is that he was very, very passive. You know, this guy, the problem with watching him in Korea is that he wasn't as good as like the top tier. So he was getting murdered by like the top tier Korean mid laners, but was too good for like the bottom tier. I mean, basically, right? But the one thing the one thing I will say about him is he was very, very proactive, right? And I think this feeds into the Yike thing as well, because, you know, one of the things criticisms leveled at Vladdy is, you know, he's maybe not as lane dominant as he could be, just really, really insane team fighter. He's going to have, like, one of the champion which impressed me most for their new mid laner was how he would play the map on Talia. And I think that, again, this is another tool Yike will have to come and work with. So I actually rate their new mid laner, but it's very hard to judge his actual level because he was clearly like not as good as Chovy, Showmaker, BDD, you know, all of these guys, right? But a lot better than the people he was against. But anyway, he's more proactive. It will be should in theory be a more proactive mid jungle going into this year. But let's see how he.
Right, my bad point is the format of LEC versus, and it is mainly the fact that it is BO1s in the regular season.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of reasons why. First of all, do you like Fearless? Then why do you have a format that doesn't feature Fearless in the group stage? Spoiler, BO1 can't be Fearless. Logically, the BO1 is just the standard. That's the dumbest part about it. Secondly, even LCS has best of threes, for fuck's sake, like every other major region. So here's another reason that's mental, is when you go to the international tournament and you're the LEC team, even the best LEC team, you will have played a handful, 2 or 3 BO3s and 1 or 2 best of 5s. That also means you are getting the least Fearless practice of any region, and you're not going to get that overall. And then lastly, we're back to Randy Aspie 01. So I'm just not a fan personally. I think that's a step back. I mean, I know they're going to be like, as you know, but it isn't Winter Thorin, it's versus, it's a different tournament, it has its own silly format. Okay, but at the end of the day, I'm sorry, if you have the international event, it is part of the circuit, in my opinion. You can't really pretend like it's an off-season tournament or something.
It still has weight, right?
I'm not a fan.
It's not
I'm not a fan
yeah.
personally.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think part of it is like they are trying to keep the number of show days limited here. So they're basically doing best of ones 3 days a week for 4 weeks and then just going. So they're trying to keep this very, very compressed. Again, like the other major regions have started basically. The LEC will be starting today, I suppose, of recording. I'm trying to think of whether it's today or tomorrow. I think it's today. Sorry, Saturday, isn't it? Apologies.
But it's though, that's always so jarring to me, Initialise, because if anyone watches the LPL and the LPL especially, they play every day, mate.
Yeah, they do.
It's like 5 days a week at least.
Basically, and multiple series. You end up with like multiple 3 series days.
Yeah.
It's very, very intensive. And again, with more teams, there's lots of other stuff going on. The LCK is a very similar scenario, right? And they still get a lot more games off. And I think that's very frustrating. We don't get that. I agree with the Fearless point. I think that's a bit disappointing in that sense. If you want to do this, then the hardline answer is you do full Fearless, where for the regular season, every time that a team plays a champion is then banned globally for the tournament. And you play that way. Because I know there were some crazy off-season tournaments where they did that one, and you end up with people playing like Fizz in the finals because every other champion was gone. It's bloody ridiculous. It's very entertaining. I don't know how much you would learn from it, but it would force you to play other champions. Yeah, I think I'm largely there with you. For for the record, I'm quite happy to see people like the EMEA Masters winners finally getting some plaudits to get the opportunity to come up here. I think that circuit being so dissociated from LEC has been disappointing for a while. I think there should be some fun with that. But yeah, format is underwhelming, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, technically, best of one is fearless, no? I mean, you're not...
okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, okay. But I think part of the problem is going to be, the KCB situation, right? Which is that obviously they didn't keep any part of that roster together because it's a development roster. I'm quite excited to see Hazel. I think he's actually, from what I saw, he actually has a bit of potential. But you have 6 games a day now, so your broadcast is going to be longer. You have fewer broadcast talent, as we've said, and I think that KCB are going to get destroyed in almost every single game, which makes me sad because obviously Yukino he started his career on EG, so I want to see him do well, but I feel that some of the games are going to be very, very uneven, the split, and it's going to make fewer exciting games. And I think that is also going to be an issue. And, going from 5 games to 6 games, it was often a drag at some point. Maybe it will be a little bit, that also concerns me, right? So that's my issue a little bit with the format as well. I've single round robin, best of one. It means every team gets to play Los Ratones and KCB, and maybe that's a good thing if you're a Los Ratones fan. Maybe it's a bad thing if you don't want to watch pure rookies getting on KCB, being demolished, right? But of course, it will be very, very funny seeing the post-match thread when KCB get their first win. And obviously, whenever Los Ratones get their wins, I don't think either of them will make top 8. I think Los Ratones have a shot, but I think they're probably going to be about 9 or 10. But we'll see. But definitely, going to 6 games when more of those games have the opportunity to be washers is not a good thing, right? So I agree on that.
This leads as a segue into Initialize's ugly point.
Yeah, this is one that's been had a few times. My ugly point basically is it's not that these teams are joining. For the record, I am all for this. I've been for this for a while. I think EMEA Masters being so decoupled from LEC and franchising not having any mobility between the challenger scene and upwards has always been a frustrating point for me. Again, I grew up with the Premier League and Rugby Union where there is some mobility, and I think that has hurt LEC talent development and allowed teams to kind of half-arse it. And I get budgets are a restriction, but still the fact that a lot of teams are basically just... You'd end up with 3-4 teams that were a bit useless in the LEC, and you didn't have that potential for upward mobility with franchising. All of this is just a caveat before I basically say I think it is a bit ugly, not bad, but ugly the way that KCB and Los Ratones ended up joining the LEC, because it was horribly messaged by LEC, how the teams felt incredibly flat-footed, had no insight. There was a conversation earlier about the fact that actually a lot of these teams get to come in about how paying for the franchising fees and that kind of thing, which is a bit galling for a lot of the teams that have paid a lot of money to be there. And again, that's no shade on KCB or Los Ratones. They took the opportunity that was in front of them. God damn, you take that every time. And they've no idea what's going on in the back end of that. KCorp doesn't have a clue on that one. I mean, KCB probably have a bit more sign on it. But then you add in all of that drama around that and the teams. It's all done kind of without a lot of forethought in terms of, okay, so what about players that want to leave the teams between last year and now? Because a lot of these players are sought after prospects. Are they going to be forced to stay on the team? No. Okay, well then we've got this team that's coming up that's actually not the team that deserve to get here, and now we're playing with a load of rookies out of nowhere, and this could be a bit of an awkward moment for this team. Or well, what about the sister team thing? We took away from that because we were worried about conflict of interest stuff. Don't get me wrong, I love the sister team, Samsung White, Blue, some of the best teams ever, great to watch, all of that kind of stuff. But there was all that relatively reasonable conflict of interest stuff, and we've got KCP coming up. What happens with that? The messaging was quite slow, not particularly well rolled out. I think in its concept, the idea of having EMEA Masters teams get to come and play with the LEC teams in an official tournament is bloody cool, especially when you do have teams with as much popularity, and that's no bad thing for getting eyes on the league, as Los Ratones managed to get last year, which is pretty extraordinary to see. Again, I was working NLC last year. I was at those stadiums as they were filling out. Speaking of people who could do homestands, potentially. But the longevity of it, I get a bit worried about how it's set up for. The implementation of it as well, I think was a little cack-handed. I think it's fair to say at the very least. And then the messaging to the public was, here's the announcement. But what about the meat of it? How long did it take for that to come out? And it led to a lot of like rumors and bad blood and teams going, wait, what the hell? We didn't agree to this in this kind of capacity. And aren't we supposed to have some insight into like, or some like say as co-owners or stakeholders in the league and franchise partners? What do you mean you can just walk over us on this one? Aren't we supposed to have the power to veto this? No. So why have we got this franchise spot then? You got to have all those kinds of additional nuancy bits that have just kind of weighed down the implementation of this and making it a lot less cool than it could have been with a little bit more forethought and better management, I guess. And that is frustrating for what is, at its heart, a relatively cool concept as far as I'm concerned.
Sure. I mean, the problem is that Riot, if you'll excuse my language, like fucked over KC for many, many years, right? Because KC did exactly what Los Ratones did. And then to give Los Ratones this obviously KC are going to fight to the ends of the world, right? Because I think Kometa's gone on, he's interviewed about how he had to sell, like, this club was his baby and he had to sell, like, a lot of it. To
raise the money to buy the slot, of course, yeah.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So obviously he's never going to, like, accept anything. And maybe if they'd done this 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been so bad. Yeah. It's just because of the precedent that they've set that now things are very, very awkward. And like, to be clear, I'm not going to enjoy watching KCB lose these games because I want the team to do really well. But I think that they've done exactly the right thing, right? Which is they promoted Tao and Hazel from their whatever, the young, the
trainees
the trainees, right? And I'm a bit questionable on Tao, but I think, again, like I said, I think Hazel actually has like actual potential long term. But so I think this is the right move from KC, but it's not the right move to make a more entertaining product. And I think that is a problem. And I think this is because they didn't have a solid plan for this kind of thing 5 years ago. Now it looks much worse, right? I think they've knocked themselves into a corner. Also, on the Los Ratones thing, I don't know how much this benefits. So obviously, it's good for Los Ratones fans. Obviously, it's good for Cadril. But is it going to be that good for like Crowny or for Nemesis, or for Bals, for their stream? I don't know how these things work, right? But they have this mystique around them when they're playing in the ERLs and just stomping everybody, and they almost completed the perfect golden road. Is it going to be good for Nemesis stream numbers when he comes and goes and plays against Jojo and like has a really, really rough game? I don't know how much it even benefits the players, but I don't understand these kind of nuances, right? So what I will say is, I think that the way it's handled wasn't great, but I think the seeds for that wasn't just this offseason. I think it's a long-term issue, not integrating the two, not having a good long-term plan for integration, which started 4 or 5 years ago, when KC started winning.
The silly thing is, the actual overall premise wasn't terrible. It's just, as you saw from what was leaked in the off-season, it was just so easily transparent that it was cynical. Because if what you'd have just said is what essentially plays into what Initialise is saying, right, here's what we're going to do. Because we have this awesome set of VRLs and we have EU Masters, we're going to make the winner get a spot in LEC for a split. Great idea. But because if you did that, it actually ended up happening, maybe Los Ratones wouldn't win it, which was the real team you wanted in the whole time. Instead, they had to go, I tell you what, No, wait a minute. The team that was the most dominant in the season, that was already Los Ratones. They get in. Oh, phew, I've got Los Ratones in. And I'll tell you what, the team that wins the split as well gets in as well. And then that turned out to be KC Blue. The joke is, the reason why it's so obvious you wanted Los Ratones is, like, no one would put that the most dominant over the other. That was obviously, like, make sure they're in no matter what as insurance. And then 2, you clearly didn't think through, wait a minute, what if one of the academy, like, ERL teams qualifies? You just in your brain thought, well, as long as it's Los Ratones and then pick a different team that's good, Barca or something like that, then we're okay. Yeah. And the problem you had was you clearly didn't think through the conflict of interest one. I agree. Tell you what, who should be more pissed off even than all these teams in terms of this sense If I was the LCK and I woke up to this news, I'd go, wait, you made me when our whole system was practicing against each other and having 2 sets of teams, and that's how I developed talent. You made me sell all those players to China, and now they just get to play themselves in a fucking league. And then you're even making like restrictions on like which players can play just be lifted too. Like, what do we do? By the way, you almost had to do it though, because as pointed out, they have literally made Kometo jump through 500 hoops and also quite literally give up part of the ownership of his org. And then you said, you know what, Cadril, you don't have to do any of that, mate. And by the way, this is what's even more mad. Kometo built an actual functional business around KC. Cadril, as far as I know, didn't even pay them salary and just did what is... Everyone else in esports tells me this is the esports grift, is when you go, hey, you get some exposure, kid. Freelance, best thing for you. J. Jonah Jameson meme. Like, fuck it, anyone else would be despised for that. Bro, if Carlos had ever had players playing for free, he would be the devil incarnate. Remember, Carlos was evil for making Perks a multi-millionaire with a stroke of one pen. That made him the biggest scumbag of all time. Apparently, it's cool to just have, again, as Peter says with the Mystique, what I'm supposed to believe is secretly the second best mid laner ever, if he'd have ever stuck around and had the right offer. I'm supposed to believe him just playing for freezies to make Cadril stream massive is a great thing for just League of Legends. And then also, I agree, people are actually misunderstanding how bad this could be for both sets of groups. Like, I could see KCB, by the way, just getting tooled all day long, even by the likes of the Navis that people don't think are going to be good. I could see them just being the whipping boys. And God forbid Los Ratones is a bottom half team or one of the worst teams. Because again, as Peter just said, your whole sort of dynamic you were teasing and playing with was that Nemesis never has to actually prove it against the top players again. Because everyone wants to believe if he joins again, he'd be right below caps. I'll tell you the real nightmare if you're a Los Ratones fan. What happens if Nook bodies this fucker? What happens if Poby is just better than him? What happens if, God forbid, in one game with the right melee matchup, Leader just claps him in lane a bunch of times? That guy you all said was shit, should never play. What then, homie? What then, my dude? Because that's good. And also, I'll give you another one. If I was the Baus FFF, I would never enter professional play. I actually think your brand, actually part of the drama, that part of the charm is the mystique of like, you wouldn't try this in pro play. This is like solo queue tech that he's using in thing. And NLC still had that vibe and it still was fun in that way. If you actually just have to play real League of Legends, spoiler, we're going to have to criticize this guy quite a lot if he just has bad laning phases, if he just dies a bunch of times. It's not fun anymore. It's not an exhibition match at that point in time. We're just going to have to tell you, you're just a worse top laner than this guy here. And I'll tell you what, if I'm looking at the rest of the players in the league, the first thing I'm thinking if Baus has 3 shit games is, why isn't Adam in the LEC anymore? You know what? I wasn't even a fan of him. He's better than this guy. Why aren't some of these people there? People laughed at Wonder coming back. Mate, he's better than fucking Baus. What are we doing? So I also think, sadly, people want it to be this crazy hype thing that these teams come in. But actually, at the moment, there's no guarantee they have the success at all. And then, yes, the way it was revealed to the world just made, unfortunately, actually, the league and Riot look a bit silly over and over again. Like, it didn't have this effect they hoped of, like, hey, guys, we're going to give you what you want. We're going to let, like, fucking Los Ratones in. They thought, I'm pretty sure Riot thought that would be, like, universally heralded. It's like, awesome. I want to see Los Ratones play, which you all in theory do. But the way it's actually, in practice, being rolled out, I don't think it's great, personally.
So I think the other thing I will say is basically, I think there are 2 additional bits for me on this one. One is... part of this was it was a limited time deal. The Lost Returns project was never supposed to be a long-term thing. The players signed on knowing what was going on. And actually it worked out better than anyone expected. They actually joined NLC, were actually good, weird, messy, had flaws, but had some real strengths too. They actually did, for all it was for exposure bucks, they got a lot of exposure books and built some really impressive brands out of that and all that kind of stuff that a lot of the streaming houses did. Like, how did FaZe become, obviously FaZe Esports and FaZe Clan and all that mess has now gone into a whole thing, but they made a big content house out of doing similar things. Like, there are ways to do that, and it was very successful, right? Great for them, but it was a limited time deal. Lost Returns, as it stands, are probably done after this split, or at least changing hands. It was
maybe forever, even it's implied.
Yeah, potentially, and that's fine too. So it's a limited time deal, so it's like, oh man, if we want to cash in on this, it has to be now. Which obviously then very galling for players like Kometo. It's like, well, what happens if I had done the same thing? Would you have done the same for me? And I get that. Actually, my honest response is, realistically, KC probably should have potentially found a way in earlier. Or the big thing is, really, there should have been changes the franchising system a while ago. I think franchising has been flawed for a long time. I had my concerns when it first came in, and I was like, look, I think we are going to lose out on a lot of potentially really cool homegrown orgs that don't have the backing to just say, yeah, I can put up 5 million euros a year to ensure that we hit the standards for X, Y, and Z, and you don't then handle those kind of player-built orgs that come together from, you know, some kid from Hungary who's got nothing to his name who makes that run happen. You don't have that anymore. And actually, the way that Valorant kind of did its kind of semi-franchising system, where you do have those guest slots, probably should have been in LEC, LCS for a while, and that would have helped, you know, not have this massive scramble to change things around. But I think Riot have dragged their feet a little bit with changing some of the LEC stuff. I think a lot of that has also come, unfortunately, with layoffs and budget cuts and stuff, that actually the appetite to have those conversations and put the groundwork in to do it probably just hasn't been there. And again, that's me speculating, not having loads of inside knowledge on that one per se, outside of, you know, like vague conversations with various people in the scene, so but it is speculation more than anything else. But basically, that combination of time pressure of, well, Lost Returns will go soon and we want to get as much out of them as we can. The homeground stuff has been great. For the Rebel League of its own stuff, rather, has been great on that front. To have that issue of like, well, it needs to happen now. Shit, we need to change the system. Well, the system's kind of a mess. What do we do? Well, I guess we do this. Has kind of just basically, it's undercut franchising without actually changing franchising into a way that would have been more sustainable probably in the long run. Has made a lot of the other teams feel pretty crap about that kind of stuff. Again, I don't blame KCB and Lost Returns for taking the offer. Of course you do every day of the week. It's not their fault. They've been successful. But I do think like this has just been relatively poorly managed. And then there is just that wider conversation about franchising. And bluntly, it probably does need to shift / be changed into a model where there is a little bit more ability to have this happen without undercutting the value of everyone else who's bought into this league, basically, which is frustrating.
The problem is, it is just Cadril privilege. Like, every single reason why Los Ratones and Cadril must be in LEC applied tenfold to Kometo and KCorp years ago. Remember, they bought fucking Astralis' spot, a team that never gave a flying fuck about League of Legends, and beyond that brief, like, actual min-max Origin roster, never put any effort into branding and being big at all. And as a result, you always, list every reason why you should have Los Ratones, and it applied more so to KCorp, and they even would bring more financial incentives and positives to the league as well, in a way that Los Ratones doesn't fill stadiums. They don't have a massive fan base that's activated, that's bought jerseys, and they don't have any of these things. So but the joke is, it's the one area where me and Kometo are completely aligned. I do think it's complete bullshit. Now, here's the one thing he won't like. I also think it is utterly fucking absurd to allow him to have two of his teams play against each other in real professional matches that have betting markets betting on them. That's an unacceptable conflict of interest. It's the one reason why I, in theory, agreed with removing sister teams back in the day, especially because I won't go into them on this one, it's an EU podcast, but I do think there were examples of teams throwing games to each other in order to make the bigger team progress, and things that all the team that needs to go to the playoffs go to it. So I think that's an example of a conflict that you just don't allow. There's other ones where it's like, hey, watch out for this, it's dangerous. That's one where you just don't even allow, especially bearing in mind, by the way, Riot, quite frankly, are not equipped to investigate match fixing and will not be investigating match fixing. So unless essentially I'd have to go and investigate it for them to get caught doing this. So I don't want to do that, thank you. I'm not your fucking unofficial police. So I think it sucks, personally. And I do feel for Kometo in that regard. Like, it basically, what you told Kometo is, to play at this game, son, you must do what is called baiting to hazard. You must essentially almost bankrupt yourself or ruin your business, which is mental, because again, why doesn't Cadril have to do that? Why does Cadril, by the way, you could even argue Cadril might even have an easier time raising millions at the point he's at with all his brand, etc. Why doesn't he do that? The joke is Cadril gets to be a millionaire and just gain profit all the time, and then he doesn't have to ever risk any of his business. And then even if he does one split, he just gets one split for funsies. What is that? And I'm sorry, I do believe in the future. Soon, if Los Ratones do leave and exit forever, there won't be 2 slots anymore. There'll be 1, and eventually there might be no slots, and they might even walk the whole thing back and just be 10 teams and no versus / winter split with that. And they might, because I think it was all just to get Los Ratones in. I think they just saw a mixture of core streaming and this is hype. This is just a way to inject some interest into the LEC. I think they've just done it, as you say, in a cack-handed way. Like, there were so many other ways you could have done this to seem classier and sort of with guardrails, as it were.
Yep, I mean, get ready for the announcement. You know, we took on board your feedback,
there you go.
and we did an experiment, but we rolled it back.
Yep.
Thanks for your feedback on this topic, and
Yep.
we've learned valuable lessons, right? That's the tweet that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially because I can tell you, if you know any successful esports team, as in one that got massive fan base, could do massive revenue, the biggest bane is that to be in any sports league, you have to take outside VC and sell part of the company and the equity. So if I've done that and then the other guy doesn't have to, I would feel totally aggrieved. I think it's a totally legitimate position.
Yeah, I think like the part of this is actually they should. I'm on baseline. If this is agnostic of all that stuff in the past, I am happy to see some of this stuff happening. I think it's really cool to have these hype teams come in with all of this fan base, and that's not a bad thing in and of itself. I think again, I have no issue there. I do think that the stuff in the past is really frustrating, and like changing it for the better would be good. But this isn't properly changing it for the better, is it? It's not meaning this doesn't happen in the future, really, is it? For the next Carmine Core or whatever, because that is frustrating. And I guess the other side of it is like I will push back a little bit on the stadium filling thing, because again, Lost Returns did fill out like 2 8K stadiums.
No, they
last
didn't.
year.
They were in the finals.
No, for
That wasn't a
for the
home stand they held.
Sure,
he means
that's
like
fair.
They were
that's
just
fair.
in the final of a tournament.
But they were the ones who filled the stadium.
We can't A/B test it. We can't know what would have happened if the other team was there, can we?
Sure. I mean, I guess, but like even then, like pretty much everyone.
As I said, mate, nobody can fuck with KC. They can fill 20,000 people as if they were Real Madrid announcing Cristiano Ronaldo, and they're not even vaguely the best team in League of Legends. Like, that is incredible.
I mean, that's
why
very
Kometo
different
is at a level, I do agree, he's beyond Cagel's core stream.
It's very impressive. Yeah.
You
And again, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I would also say there is still a fairly significant fan pool there for at least filling out like a Hovert-sized stadium in, what was it, Stockholm, which is like 8-9K capacity, which is not bad going, right? And that's not a bad thing to be wanting to do stuff with as a league. But again, there is that way in the way which it's done, the way in which it was done in the past, and that kind of the fact that nothing systematically has changed in a way that I think has actually helped things. Rather, it's exacerbated things and brought a lot of issues that have been boiling under the surface for a long time to the fore is frustrating. And I'm hoping things change for the better. But as it stands, I suspect we may end up with, as Peter saying, yep, cool, well, we've done that once, good, never doing it again, bye, and just not dealing with it.
Also,
which is like
by the way,
worst possible outcome.
Another player I think will actually have a bad time, even though this is what he wanted, is going to be my boy Crowley. Because the worst thing about Los Ratones is they are a T1 K-popified stan fan base. They're not a fan base that's about elite League of Legends. So I can tell you, anyone who's ever seen a post-match thread knows every time Los Ratones loses, well, it can't be Reckless's fault, he's the golden boy. Can't be Nemesis' fault, he'll complain on his stream and say what's wrong. Bounce is just fucking around anyway, and Felly is the young up-and-coming. So it's always Crowley's fault. Crowley is the whipping boy every single time they lose. And spoiler, yes, obviously if they lost the game, he probably didn't carry the team fight, did he? I understand the way the ADC fucking role works. So sadly, he will also, when they have all the bad games, he will get his shit pushed in by the fans. Even though I actually think he is a player who deserves to be in the LEC, just on a real team.
No.
I'd like him to actually play for like a real team.
But I mean, I will say the stakes for the player. So I think, again, org side, this is just a nice free roll, right? But the stakes for the Los Ratones players are really, really high for this.
This could be the end of your career if you do badly.
Yeah, I think Bounce is fine, right? Like, if Bounce runs it down, it's not going to affect his streaming numbers, right? Like, he'll be fine, right? Yes. But for Nemesis and Crowley are staking a lot, like on doing well in this tournament. Vager, I can't pronounce his name, but like he will not play LEC if he has a bad tournament here. He's just never going to play it, right? And Reckless is Reckless.
By the way, irony of all ironies, think of what Nemesis dismissively said about why Velia didn't join the LEC. You wouldn't want to just go and play one split for a bad team and ruin your whole career. You're about to do that with him, homie. Like, let me see you at the end of this split. Let's see if you just tanked his career. Anyway, by the way, we've got 2 more points to go, so let's keep going.
Yes, so true. We've been on this one for
Sorry.
Peter, what is your ugly point?
I'll make my point. Okay, so my point is about SK. It's an ugly point. Again, the season hasn't started yet, so I haven't got to see them play. But I will say that a lot of people criticizing SK's roster building decision. But the reason why I'm going to say this is an ugly point is I don't think they had a choice except to what's the thing? To give their roster building for next year to somebody else outside of the org because of the way that they treated rookies, by which I mean Rika and Janax and Kedui. Like this year, like last year, sorry, I don't think that they had a choice. I don't think people wanted to join SK. And I think they put themselves in a Dignitas situation, which they didn't need to do, right? Like, I mean, for me, it would have just been very, very easy for SK, who were never going to go to Worlds if Abadage joined anyway, right? If they just like let Rika sit out the whole year, just admit you just messed up. Okay, you gave your rookies a chance. You gave them the entire year. It's so easy. It's so easy to not bring in the player, just tank 3 weeks, and then you have the option to go for maybe not the top tier rookie, but there's a lot of top lane talent, for instance, right, this year, or like there's a lot of jungle talent, mid lane bit awkward, right? But there's a lot of good prospects coming into LEC, and maybe you can persuade a Yukino to come and join you. Maybe you can come and get these options, but because they brought in Abadage, because of everything that happened in Summer Split, it made this offseason completely impossible for anyone who was on SK to build any other roster except going to a player and saying, build this roster for us. And I think that even though I think that this SK roster has the potential to do something, I think that people are misunderstanding the issue with SK's roster building, right? It's not that they necessarily believe in all of this. Maybe they do, right? It's that they put themselves in a position through really basic mistakes that they didn't have to do for any reason at all. In fact, I think they even paid Abadage like more money because Bukada was on the team, right? And then he went to another team, so they gave him even more money, right? And then this didn't need to happen, first thing. And then just on SK in general, I think that this roster, in theory, obviously a lot of it will depend on Leader. I didn't think Leader was that impressive in NLC, which worries me a lot. But if this is prime Leader, I think that this roster, actually, there's a lot of things that can go well on this roster. I think there's a high chance Wonder might play mid this year for some games, because that will allow you to flex Leader's champion pool to top lane. And in fact, a lot of the champions he wants to play really benefit from the top lane. What's it called? It's the quest,
yes.
Like the top lane.
One little note: as it stands, that's not possible to do in draft very easily.
It's not?
Because as it stands in TR, you are obligated to lock in your role quest before you hit champion.
You can't take the quest.
So you can't. So basically, so you can flex champions, but you can't flex roles.
Yeah.
Okay. So then everything that I thought was positive about this is not positive at all, because the problem is that even if he does well on his, that's the way. But if he does well on his melee champions mid, he's not going to be ahead of the top laner, right? Because of how the quests work. So if you can't, so then that was my one thing that I was going to say was going to be really, really fun about this roster. Okay, so then they can't do that. In that case, I think things are going to might be a little bit rough, which for me makes I'm a bit sad, because I think Yopper is a guy who deserved his chance in the LEC for a long time, and maybe this roster will struggle, but obviously it's going to live and die by Leader. But the Leader games I saw last year were not as impressive as the ones I saw 2 years ago, 3 years ago, right? So let's see if he has a renaissance. I think Wonder, it's very interesting. Wonder was like 1600 LP like a couple of weeks ago. So he's at least motivated. So let's go and see. Let's go and see how this works. But yeah. Sorry.
It's such a weird one, isn't it? Because I think you've definitely hit a nail on the head there. It was there was some unnecessary fumbles with rookies last year, which probably didn't leave SK as many options as they might have had once upon a time. I think Kadui in particular, what a frustrating thing. He was actually worthy of keeping around, and the fact that that's very frustrating, that's not happened. That said, Yopper, great AD carry. Him and Clocks back in the day were a wonderful duo. I think he's been grinding away in the ERLs for a very long time. Deserves a shot. Theoretically, if all these players play like it's 5 years ago, we're in a great spot, aren't we? It's not 5 years ago, though, is it? And I saw Leader play last year. I cast some of his games. It was not particularly exciting. And that gets a bit worrying. But hey, if you're going to take a gamble on a different style of roster, I see what SK have done. I see what Mickey has managed finally to get his little dreamed esports moment together. And that's, good for you, Mickey. If it works, fantastic. But I considering the amount of conversations we've had about rookies and their treatment and how you go about managing their time in LEC, SK really didn't do a very great job with that last year. And again, similar conversations about Poby, like immediately dropped from Fnatic after a split. I said, look, I think the last time I was on, I said, look, Poby getting picked up feels like that. In fact, that was my ugly point, wasn't it? Saying, look, I'm not sure about what the decision making is here and why it's being made the way it is, for it to end up in the way it has. Not that Fnatic have necessarily built the roster per se, but it's not the first time an LEC org has fumbled rookies. And the fact that SK potentially are obligated to be in this position, forced into this position, don't have other options, is perhaps more telling than the theoretical ceiling that this roster has, which could actually be quite good fun. I'm excited to watch a lot of these players play. I don't know whether it'll be good, but what happens next year if we see a lot of these players go, or in a split and a half when things crash and burn and say leader doesn't have it in him? What happens then? And I think we may yet see some fireworks.
The problem I have is the points Peter made are accurate. It's just that they also, to me, are logically why you have to end up in this situation. And this is actually a good roll of the dice, which is SK has never been an org that attempted to develop talent and build year on year and keep a core and add to one piece. And they never did that. All they did is constantly roll the dice and take cheap players and then every time bring back an older player, they necro, and then have one good player that they pay, is what I heard over and over again. And if you noticed, that min-max approach, I actually always say they're one of the best min-max orgs I think ever in European League of Legends. Like, they've a million times made playoffs when they shouldn't have been, or been like slightly better than you expect, but they never deliver. They got anything out of it at the end of it, and partly probably because they weren't a super well coached team. They weren't a great team with the structure around them. They just had some players. They rolled the dice. When it worked, it worked. When it didn't, they just reset the whole thing and just brought out a new set of players. So my problem is, essentially, here's the issue. You can't pick apart this roster because, as far as I know, I even asked him about this behind the scenes, this is the only team that Mickey X could have gone to that let him pick the squad, basically. So he had to go to an SK type team. He couldn't go to, like, Heretics and then go, let me pick this. No, that's not the way it works. So the problem is, you can't say, oh, but imagine if this same roster was like this roster, but then we have like Kadui and Rika instead of no, because there wouldn't be Wonder then if without Mickey X. Like, Mickey X is the reason Wonder's here, but it's also the reason Leader's here. So if you don't like Leader being here, do you like Wonder being here? Because I'll tell you what, Wonder's fucking overqualified to be here too, boys. So to me, I totally appreciate the Leader thing. When you saw him on Ruddy Sack, he was fucking shit. Yes, absolutely. Now, I will say, everyone fucking loves that boy Nemesis when he turns on his stream and says a bunch of nonsense sophistry. So what was Nemesis' big excuse as to why it doesn't matter that Los Ratones, that he even admitted would probably get smashed if they went to LEC? Because we're not playing LEC right now, guys. We're not professionals and we're not being paid a salary and we don't have a team house and we're not all working. We're just playing semi-pro and NLC. And so for that level, similarly, then why would Leader be at his absolute best? As far as I know, by the way, beyond Mickey X, Leader wasn't trying hell for leather to get back in LEC, boys. I think he was actually somewhat at peace with the fact those days had gone. And he's just essentially, even in ERLs, he's just a solo queue player, mate. He does what he wants, he plays what he wants, he does what he wants, he goes in when he wants, he doesn't give a fuck if he loses the game. One thing that's good about Leader is he is very Norwegian in the sense he has a natural elitism. He doesn't give a fuck what you think. The joke is, he learned the secret I've told many toxic players over the years. Just stop talking. You don't actually have to be nice. Your problem is you think, I don't want to betray who I am. No, just don't talk. Just stop talking. That's all. You can be internally, keep it all going on in there. Just don't press send. Don't get yourself chat restrict to yourself, basically. That's my advice to all toxic players. I can't transform you as a human, but I can fix your problem literally by telling you a key not to press. Don't press enter.
Just
there you
stop
go.
being an arsehole out loud.
Use the mouse.
Keep it inside. Yeah.
Use the abilities. Don't press enter. There you go. I'd even take the enter key off your fucking keyboard. That's what I would do if I was some of these guys. So I actually think if you look at the squad, I get why everyone's skeptical. There's absolutely a world where it could just be like the fucking 8th or 9th best team and who gives a shit at that point. Sure. And then it'll be egg on Mickey X's face. With that said, though, I also understand from knowing Mickey X why he attempted this project, which is, first of all, what is the fondest memory of his career? The G2 Super Team. Now, true, he is missing the G2 Super Team was a super team. But beyond that, he had immaculate vibes and everyone got along and the way people worked together, and even when they would argue, it's almost like, oh, that silly old days, the great battles we had, but then it made us win it. I think he's trying to recreate that, because if you listen to the stories of G2 and Fnatic, it sounds like he's had some fucking hard years, mate. It sounds like he's been in the shit where it's like industry politics and fucking, oh, when you're not in the room, maybe the other guy's shit talking you, or am I wanted, all these. So I think his whole thing was like, you know what, fuck that. I want a vibes team. I want my guys in. I want to just play. I want that to not be a concern for me. And then we'll see what happens. And then obviously he believes in Leader and all the rest of them. I get that.
I think the other side then is that actually for all they've been rolling the same style of dice every time, right? Around that, like, we're going to have that one player, we kind of try and build around a little bit, we pay a little bit more, but we're going to keep rolling on these kind of young talent and playing that kind of min-max style you were talking about. The fact they've actually been able to roll a different dice this time around and actually bring some eyes to the team, because actually there's a lot of pretty popular, interesting players there. I don't think
they're also going to be one of the most hate-viewed games.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like, actually, SK Gaming, when have people been excited to tune into an SK game as like a fan for, it's been a while, right? Like, truly, like, yo, I want to see this team play. There were moments, right, we saw, hey, there's this kind of Rahel bot lane with Loopy. Oh, that's kind of fun. We know, like, you get those kind of moments where, like, they had sparks where there's, like, this kind of underdog team has that story, but how much viewers did they pull in? How much interest did they pull in? There was something about the SK org saying, hey, I've got a load of really famous, popular old players who are coming in relatively for cheap, who they managed to build this roster, who are going to bring in a load of eyes. You know what? That sounds pretty good to us. So it's not like, I think there was definitely that side of it too, right? So, agnostic of the other stuff, I still think it's a pretty fun roster. It's some fun stuff for SK to be working with. I will, however, also say, like, as Peter said, like, there was just that element of, like, part of the reason why they have to roll this other dice is because they didn't necessarily have the dice they had been rolling available to them in the same way, even if the new dice is still nice and shiny and cool.
And also, when people laugh at this roster, you can laugh at the leader one if you want. He's a mercurial player. Maybe he'll be shit, maybe he'll be good. I do think he's a very talented player, by the way. I just think he's one of those very idiosyncratic people in general in his approach to life. But I'll tell you what, when people laugh at the whole roster, mate, Skeens and Yopper completely earned a spot in LEC. What are we even talking about? Do you not watch the RLs or something? These are both, like, I think Yopper's a good player and Skeens just has earned his way back. Look at all the teams he's been in, all the success he's had. Yeah. I think these are totally fine pickups, appropriate to the SK level. Like, okay, go on.
Yeah, no, and I think Wonder is very, like, I can talk from the Heretics side. Like, Wonder was doing his best on Heretics, right? Like, I mean, there was a lot of very difficult things behind the scene, but he was always, in a sense, always kind of over-sacrificing himself in order to keep everything stable. And I think that he might surprise people. I mean, I don't think we're going to see like 2016, 2017 Wonder on Gnar, like 1v9ing the entire game. But he is somebody who is actually incredibly smart about the game, and he's actually playing solo queue, right? So I think
engaged for now, right? That's good news.
Yeah. And we have a lot of rookie top laners in the league this year, right? So he's going to be a good measuring stick, right?
The last time Nemesis competed in the LEC was in 2020, like half a decade ago, literally. But people would tell me, like, oh, he might have a chance to be really good. Wonder was actually good on that Fnatic like 2 years ago or something, boys. Like, he was actually still.
I cast that game. Player. My first ever LEC cast.
So miss me with the whole.
He had a perfect game and he died.
So miss me with the idea he's washed and can never be good again. When I've already seen him more recently in LEC do it in playoffs and regional fights, etc. Meanwhile, Nemesis was in literally NLC, and by the way, did you not see how that last tournament went? Getting his head banged on. Like, so again, I'll just say it's one of those ones where again, it's the flirting harassment meme. One does the fucking harassment, the other one's the Nemesis is the flirting. Anyway, last point of the show. I've actually saved this. What's hilarious is this should have been a Peter Dun point, but I'll be the one to take it. It's all good. I'll tell you what is an example of how eyes are on SK and on KC and on Los Atones, and they're looking at the moves of Humanoid to Vita. There's one roster has been completely slept on. It has zero hype, it doesn't even have any flame, and I think it's actually very good GMing, bearing in mind what they had last year. It's Team Heretics roster. So my ugly point is the no hype, right? First of all, the tracing guy, I mean, Peter will attest, he's going to be a good player, mate. That is going to be a legit player. Chio is actually already like the most slept on player in the fucking LEC. I can't even believe he's in the same team. The Seren guy, okay, that's a bit of a gamble. We'll see how that one goes. I think Ice is excellent. Another very quiet, literal quiet player, but who's really solid player. And I think Stend actually showed some very good promise last year. His problem was we had like super rookies, so no one even gave him a look in for Rookie of the Year. So I think you look at this squad, mate, I could see this squad like fucking around and being like 5th best team or something. I think they could do something.
I agree. I looked at this roster and went, man, that's good. I also look at the backroom staff, like Mithy's there. Mithy has a very experience, especially because he doesn't have to be the head coach. He can do the thing he's good at and not necessarily as much of the people management stuff.
Let's see if this means Sten goes to the next level, bro. Let's see if he does the Bussio effect to Sten. Let's see it.
Whereas Hedon's a guy I've worked with League Mastery stuff. Like, this guy knows how to do structures and coaching as a system that you can fit everyone else into. I think you've got a lot of really good pieces here to work with in the back room, and then a mix of experienced players. Like Show at this point is getting towards veteran status.
Sure.
Like he's been playing a few years at this point. Ice has been in the league and successful for a number of years. Seren is not new. He's been over the place, doing well over in Turkey, and I think he was on Galleons and NNOs. He's been on some pretty big orgs within the ERL system. So if you're an English viewer and maybe don't follow the ERL so much, he's a big name within certain parts of the league as well. So that's not a bad thing to be pulling up. Sten's a guy I've cast religiously over the years, and I think he's very talented. Like, there's a lot here for people to get excited about, and I'm kind of there with you. I think people are sleeping on this team. I think, as you said, winter split, 5th is doable. I will be interested to see where they are come summer, because I think there's some serious upside to a lot of these players. They could be legitimately dangerous in playoffs later in the year, and I am very excited to see what a year of coaching for a lot of these players ends up showing.
I think for Hedon, I think he's a coach that I respect a lot. He is, for people that don't know, he was basically he took Excel to like second. I mean, they were like second in summer in one split, like the roster with Odawamne and like Abadage and Patrick. A lot of those guys weren't even in the league. Like a year later, and he managed to take them to finals where they got kind of stomped, but by G2. But he took GX to final. I mean, XL to final, which is by far the best thing that org has achieved. So I respect this guy a lot. In terms of hype for Tracin, I would say, if you ask me, so the last time I was doing proper scouting was when I was in the Heretics off season after I retired, right? I would have said that Tracin was the best top lane prospect. I would have said it was Tracin, Naknako, maybe Maintor or Emperos, and I would have had Carlson way down, right? But like the issue with Carlson is I think Carlson was really, really hard done by Heretics, because they basically put him in. I mean, the Carlson discussion is for another time, but basically I think Carlson was basically thrown under the bus in a very, very unpleasant way, right? But if you asked me 2 years ago who is like the top prospect, top lane prospect, I would have said Tracin over Nak. And Tracin basically looked like he was smurfing. I mean, Nemesis was the best player in ERLs, but Tracin was like right up there, right? And sometimes that Lost the Heretics Academy roster looked very, very dysfunctional, but this guy was consistent. He was stomping people like Prime Alfari, in the ERLs, and he looked like he didn't belong in ERLs. The issue now, obviously, is Nak has had a full year in LEC, so I think he's going to be a bit behind him. But basically, this guy has like huge amount of potential. And when I rank, I normally give people a grade, and I would have said that this guy's like A+ S- tier, right? And when we have like people like Skewmond and Callista's S tier, which means they're guaranteed to find success, I would have said Tracin is basically guaranteed to be a top 5 top laner in the league by the end of the year, maybe like a top 3 long term. I think that this guy is the guy that Fnatic, if Fnatic had this guy, Fnatic are going to Worlds, right? But they don't. Heretics have him. I think that they did well to go Shio instead. It is rumored that they were going really hard for Razork, and I think that maybe that situation worked out for them, given how Shio and Sten were playing so well. I think Ice is a good pickup. My main concern about Seren is that he is sometimes a very high resource player that sometimes struggles in high pressure situations to convert his leads. So he'll demand like a lot of support and jungle attention and maybe doesn't capitalize in it. If you ask me, but if you ask me, is there a European mid laner that I would have taken from ERLs over him? Maybe Gyu, but like it's not a bad gamble if you're going to gamble on somebody. I will say that from Sheep Esports, they were linked him to Kaze from Brazil, who, if you'd said Kaze is in the team, like, holy fuck, that would have been a really banging roster with high upside. I'm slightly suspect on like, I think Seren's peak is like Nuke, and that's his like peak. But I'm willing to be proven wrong. But definitely the Tracin, Sten, Shio core, especially in what should be a top lane meta, is very, very exciting. And yeah, I think Heretics are definitely being slept on. And actually, in my power rankings, I have them 6th, but maybe I could see a case where they could even be 5th, behind the top 3 and then Vitality and GX.
I'm just excited to see a lot of these top laners this split. I think there's some really cool people. Like, again, I'm excited to see Wonderback. I actually think when we saw a little bit of him in ERLs, he subbed in with no practice and mashed everyone. Like this like
Mainter?
The guy's still got to put the work in. We know how good he can be. I'm excited to see him back. But then when you're also looking at a load of these ERL talents have been waiting for years to get a shot. Emperos used to be a guy called Jax Plank. He used to play with Vladdy in the NLC. They were this Greek duo that were ridiculous. Probably partly why he's gone to Fnatic actually to play with Vladdy again. I think it's probably for Vladdy. It's nice to have someone he used to, these guys used to bike to internet cafes because their internet used to die mid-game. 20 minutes to go play the rest of the series. And you'd have these ridiculous pauses where their internet was so shit, and they were playing in these crappy houses to go bike to libraries and stuff to go play the damn game. Like, the drive is there. And he's a guy called Jax Plank. Back in the day, guess what he played? Jax and Gangplank. And that should be really good fun. Tracing, we just chatted about. Like, I think there's a lot here in... No joke.
Mainter.
Exactly, Mainter. Thank you. That's the one I was thinking of as well. All of these are really, really, really cool talents that have been waiting a long time to get their showing. Narco's getting to stick around as well. Could really be, particularly with the meta, a very, very fun top lane talent time in general. I think Broken Blade could end up being pressured more than he's been used to. Because again, I think he can sometimes be a little resource intensive to get ahead of the game. And that could prove interesting in this split, I suspect.
Well, by the next episode, we will have actually seen some LEC games. So we will see you on the next episode of the Best Damn League Show.